Chaos had erupted on the side slope of the mountain. Once the raindrops touched the top of the beast's head, it had sent them a signal informing them to rise to the surface. The beast was tall and wide, and to top it off, they were fast and nimble as well. Most of the students were still tired from the fight with the advanced-tiered beast earlier. Most of their MC cells had been used, and they hadn't had enough time to recover. Their instinct told them to run upon seeing the beast rising from underneath the ground. However, the beats were just too fast. As if it was a snake, the plants opened their mouths wide and sometimes consumed more than one student at a time. And one of these students was Quinn. "We have to get him out of there," Vorden shouted as he looked around at the other students. "Damn it, why isn't there someone with high-level abilities in this class?" Dell's class was considered one of the weakest class, and they had gotten significantly weaker after Aaron had left. Vorden was hoping at one point to come across one of the other classes and copy one of their abilities. One of the downsides to Vorden's ability was the fact that he would have to wait 24 hours before storing a new ability. At most, with the help of Rayton and Seal, he could store 3 at a time. Because of this, Vorden was actually cautious about whose ability he copied. Right now, it didn't seem like anyone's ability was doing well against the plants. "He's already dead. Let's just get out of here," Sae complained. "No, he's not dead," Peter replied. "I can tell." Although CIA had no clue what Peter meant by this, the others realized that the reason must be some type of link between the two. That could also be the explanation as to why Peter wasn't going mad right now after witnessing the death of Quinn. "I'll go get him," Fex said. The others were surprised by his words. They knew Quinn and Fex weren't close enough, but obviously from Fex's words, he was genuinely concerned about Quinn. But the question was, when did the two of them become so close? But Fex could tell the seriousness of the situation. He was the only one along with Quinn that hadn't done much during the fight against the advanced tier beast, so he still had plenty of energy. Fex ran and leapt into the air, but in a blink of an eye the plant swayed its large body to the side, and at an incredible speed struck Fex, who was still in mid-air, slamming him back to the side of the mountain. Maybe jumping straight forward wasn't such a good idea. The pain wreaking havoc on Fex's body wasn't too bad, but he was still a little dazed. When he managed to gather where he was, he could see the plant already coming towards him across the floor with its mouth wide open. When he finally managed to get up, the plant was already coming for him, streaking across the floor with its mouth wide open, ready to devour him. There was no panic on Fex's face, just a slight smile. "Eat me then, you piece of..." Then, he was gone, swallowed by the beast plant. It lifted its whole body and raised its head, making sure that whatever it managed to consume would go straight down. The others stayed there watching the plant for a few seconds, hoping that Fex had some sort of plan. There was a lot of popular news established by media centers about some people's miraculous escape after being swallowed by a beast. It was reported that those people killed their way out of the beast's body. But after watching for a while and seeing no result, the situation couldn't be more obvious. "Run!" Vorden shouted. "It's all we can do. If Peter says Quinn is safe, then we just have to believe him." Vorden, along with Layla, was the first to take their advice. Layla was a little behind Vorden, so she had a head start. Seeing this, Vorden decided he didn't have time to be picky about what abilities he had. If he touched Layla, then at least he would have something to protect himself while fighting. Thinking about this, he ran faster, straight for Layla. He then reached out and grabbed her hand. "Hey, what are you doing?" Layla complained, but she quickly stopped her complaint as another beast plant was heading straight for the two of them. She held out her hand, hoping to slow it down even just by a little bit. As Vorden turned, he threw one of the sprit spears and it pierced straight through the beast's head. But it clearly wasn't enough, and the beast was quick to retaliate, swallowing the two in an instant. "What are you doing?" CIA shouted. She too had rushed off hoping to run away, but she quickly stopped as she noticed there were also several plants behind them. Some groups were still dealing with them, but not even one was successful. The only group that seemed to be doing well was the group led by Teacher Dell. He had taken his large shield with him and was holding it up with his back against the mountain wall. With only one possible angle of attack, Dell and a few other students were able to block most of the incoming attacks from the plants. And since the plants weren't able to move from their original position, at most, The group had to block attacks from 3 incoming plant beasts. "Let's go over there," she shouted. "It's the safest place. With my ability, we can make it." At this point, she was tugging on Peter's uniform, but he stayed there, still looking at one of the plants. "If Quinn is somewhere else, then I need to go with him," Peter replied. "Screw you," she shouted in anger. "If you want to die, then go die yourself." "A single step," CIA cried out. She turned around and suddenly realized that all she could see was pitch black. Then, a few seconds later, she felt the sensation of falling. The whole group had now been swallowed by different beats plants. Fex and Quinn, Layla and Vorden, and finally Peter and CIA. A few of the other students had been swallowed too. A few were also knocked off the side of the cliff, while the majority somehow managed to make it to where Dell's position was, even though they felt weak. With Dell doing most of the blocking, the students were able to use their attacks to fight against the plant beasts that managed to reach them. They continued to do this until eventually the rain started to stop. The moment the rain stopped, all of the beasts went into hibernation at the same time. They returned underground and turned into beautiful stalks of purple grasses once more. Amazingly, soil started to form over the purple grasses, and in a blink of an eye, the mountain had returned to its original state. It was as if nothing had happened. "Is it over?" a student asked, huffing and panting. He felt as if he would collapse from exhaustion at any moment. "I think so," Dell replied. "I think these beasts reacted to the rain. They seemed to appear and disappear at the same time as the rain appeared and vanished. Luckily for us, in a place like this, the downpour might be strong, but it doesn't last for long. However, we don't know when the next downpour will be. What should we do now, and what about the others?" Another asked. Dell looked around, and he could see there wasn't much blood. Also, during his studies, he discovered that plant-type beasts mostly weren't carnivores. The fact that these plants probably didn't have the acid necessary to digest meat meant that the students were still probably alive. "I hate to say this, but they are probably already dead." Dell lied. "It's best if we head back down to where we were. If we carry on going upward, then there might be even more dangerous beasts." Some of the students were annoyed by what Dell had just suggested. They had made this suggestion earlier and even said the same thing to Dell, informing him there might be more danger up ahead. Still, he decided to progress anyway, and now he was saying traveling upward was a bad idea. Before heading back down the slope, a student spotted another person walking up. As they saw who it was, a huge smile appeared on their face. "Sergeant Leo," the students shouted. Even Dell was delighted and happy. There wasn't much that needed to be said, as Leo agreed that he would take them back to the shelter for now. But before doing so, Leo asked for the other students to investigate the area. Just as the students were about to head down the slope, Leo started to walk over to a strange object. A certain item was giving off energy, similar to that of a beast weapon. He had arrived by the wall of the mountain and picked up the cold, solid object. "Do you mind telling me what it looks like?" Leo asked Dell, who wouldn't leave his side. "It appears to be some type of metal flask, although it has some strange design on it. It looks like a beast's head with fangs. Maybe it's one of the items that the students dropped during the struggle." Dell answered, "I'm wondering just what is so important that it needs to be kept in a special type of beast equipment." Leo thought to himself. The last thing Quinn could remember was Layla shouting out his name. Then, in a blink of an eye, they were swallowed whole. What came afterwards was darkness. His body was continuously being swirled around, throwing him off balance, and it gave him not even a moment to balance himself nor use any of his abilities. Everything was happening so quickly, but during the whole process, he didn't feel any pain. Then when he had finally reached the bottom, Quinn felt his body continuously sinking. It felt like he had been dropped in a watery quagmire. He tried moving his hands using all the strength he could muster, but it seemed to have no effect. If anything, it was making him sink quicker. His legs were the first thing to pass through, and as it did, he felt a free range of motion. They weren't hitting or placed against anything, but they felt like he was in midair, kicking them backwards and forwards. Still, he was unable to feel anything. If the plant swallowed me and now I'm falling down, doesn't that mean I'm falling into another part of the mountain or underneath the planet? Quinn thought. The height of his fall worried him the most. His arms had now gone through the strange substance, and now only the top of his head remained. Just like with his legs, his hands were able to move freely. But now, he started worrying. If Quinn was right, then once his head fell through, his whole body would be falling. He was strong, and he had a sturdy body as a vampire. But what was he falling into? Lava, spikes, or into a pit of beasts? His abilities couldn't possibly save him from that. Quinn's mind madly spun as he thought about his next course of action. He activated his shadow ability and covered his body thinly. It seemed to have worked and slowed down the sinking process. But this was a mere stopgap, not a solution to the problem. But of course, this stopgap should give him enough time to think. Suddenly, a voice reverberated out of nowhere. "What the hell is this?" A boy yelled as his voice echoed out. "It can't be. Is that Fex's voice?" Quinn thought. The space was narrow, and if Fex was coming from above, it meant that there was only one place where Fex could land. Bang! The force and Fex's weight struck Quinn's head and managed to push him through the last bit of strange substance. As Quinn's body floated through the air, he thought back to how the last thing he ever saw might have just been Fex's backside knocking him down as he fell to his death. "That ass!" Quinn shouted. When looking around him, even though he was in the dark, his pupils widened enough, letting in more light. He could see nearly just as well as outside. His guess seemed right, and he was really falling from the ceiling. The good news was there didn't seem to be anything below that would do much damage. The bad news was he was falling from about 20 meters in height, and the ground was coming closer to him as the seconds went by. All he could do was brace himself for impact as he curled up into a ball. At the same time, a shield of shadow was created in front of him. The shadow was the first part to touch the ground, and Quinn followed shortly. It had worked. The shadow had slowed down the momentum of his fall, and Quinn went inside and fused with the shadow. "You really are useful," Quinn said as he took the shadow away, but in that moment, the speed had returned, and Quinn's body was slammed into the ground just as hard as he would have done if he hadn't used the shadow. In his haste, Quinn had forgotten that the shadow didn't actually slow things down, but only slowed down the time while he was touching the shadow. Once he traveled through the shadow, or once it was taken away, the object would continue to travel at the speed it previously had before passing through the shadow or being one with it. Covered in rubble from the walls of the cave, Quinn stood up and discovered that not a lot of damage was done to him. He felt sore in all sorts of places, but his body was sturdier than before. It also didn't seem like any of his bones had been broken from the fall. Just then, he could see Fex falling through the sky nearly at the exact same spot. "Quinn, catch me!" Fex shouted, still remembering how Fex had shoved him down under here. Quinn chose not to help. If the fall didn't kill him, it wouldn't kill Fex. Fex looked around, but the walls were too far away from him, and there was nothing nearby to attach his strings to slow down the momentum of his fall. Stepping to the side at the last moment, Quinn allowed Fex to land headfirst into the same spot as him. Unlike Quinn, Fex immediately stood to his feet after crashing, rubbing the back of his neck. "You could have at least caught me, man. What was that all about?" Fex continued to dust himself off and then looked around at where they were. They seemed to be in a large cavern that was completely empty. There were several large holes or tunnels that seemed to lead to different paths. When looking above them, they could see the plant hanging from the ceiling that had swallowed them whole. When Fex started to pat himself down, he noticed something strange. "Oh no, my flask. It must have fallen out when that giant plant hit me," Fex said angrily. "Do you want the one you gave to me?" Quinn offered. After all, it was never his in the first place, and he still had his blood bank to rely on. "No, I can't," Fex replied. "I know I'm not big on rules and stuff, but that was a gift and I can't take back gifts. Besides, my reliance on blood is a lot less than most people. It is already at that of a vampire noble. Don't worry about me." It was true that Fex never seemed to be as interested in blood as Quinn did. Even when a student would bleed slightly, Quinn would get this tingling feeling all over his body, and his eyes would naturally be drawn to the blooded area. But Fex never felt the same way. Quinn would keep it for now, and if Fex really needed it, Quinn would still be by his side anyway. Over at different sections underneath the mountain, the others were experiencing the same thing that Fex and Quinn had gone through. Layla and Vorden were both being slowly sucked down, while their faces were pressed up against each other. This is all your fault for grabbing me," Layla shouted. Vorden even felt some of the spit from her lips land on his face due to how close they were. "Did your parents never teach you how to speak without spreading spittle everywhere? And you would have been eaten anyway, so don't blame me," Vorden shouted back. As the two fell from the plant into the large cave, Layla used her ability to slow her down from falling at a fast speed. Vorden also used the same ability and achieved the same result, so they managed to get down onto the floor safely. They discovered that they were in a large cavern with several entrances, holes, and tunnels all around the cavern walls. However, there seemed to be no one else with them. "Great, looks like I'm stuck with a psycho. As if there could be a worse pairing than this," Layla thought. In another section of the cavern, the last pairing was of CIA and Peter. The two of them fell through the strange substance at the same time, and as they were falling through the air, CIA noticed that Peter's expression didn't have any trace of fear. Does he have a plan on how to land safely? Otherwise, how could he be so calm? She felt like she had no choice but to grab on. A fall from this height could kill a student, and at best, it could still break a few bones. CIA didn't have any beast gear on her, and her ability would do nothing to slow the descent. After grabbing onto the back of Peter, CIA held on tight. As they got closer to the floor, she was waiting for him to reveal his ability. She still had no idea what it was. The group had asked Peter to keep it that way while in front of the teachers. Students apart from those that knew PIO wouldn't know, but teachers had files on every student. "No, it can't be," CIA thought, and a few seconds later Peter crashed dead into the ground. CIA was hurt, but Peter managed to break most of her fall. But as she opened her eyes and looked at her comrade next to her, she could see that all of his limbs were mangled and broken. "What do we do now?" Layla asked. The two students, Vorden and Layla, were now stuck together in the cavern, around the multiple paths but with no way to tell which ones led up or down. Seeing this, Layla didn't really have an idea about what to do. "Now you're speaking to me," Logan said. "I thought it was my fault that the two of us are done here, but when it comes to trying to find a way out suddenly, you come to me for help." Layla stomped her foot onto the ground and took a few steps away. She wanted to storm off and just head down one of the paths randomly. But after only taking a few steps, her hands started to shake, and her legs were slowly banging into each other. The thought of seeing beasts like the ones they had seen so far being down here frightened her. When she was training at Pure, their main goal wasn't facing against beasts, but humans. As an agent, her tasks and training dealt with infiltration, sabotage, and a plethora of other skills. Of course, no amount of training could prepare a child for the real thing. Since coming to this school, she had seen more death than she would have liked, and it was starting to take a toll on her body and mind, more so now that her friend she would often comfort in had gone. "Why are you still having a go at me?" Layla snapped. "I told you before, you're useless. You were useless before and even more so now. At least back then you were Quinn's blood bank, but right now I can fill that role. So honestly, what use is there for you? Stop saying the same thing over and over again." Layla was at breaking point and had enough. She no longer wanted to take this type of abuse from Vorden. Without thinking clearly, she lifted up a nearby rock and swung it towards Vorden. It was an unexpected attack from Layla, so Vorden was late in his reactions and managed to dodge the small fist-sized rock. Slightly, the rock grazed his cheek. It caused a surface cut, revealing a trickle of blood. However, the first attack didn't stop there. Layla continued to lift up the rocks around and swung them towards Vorden. As they were hurled towards him, Vorden did the same, repelling them away using the same ability but also making sure not to throw attacks back. She continued forward, screaming at the top of her lungs. The sound echoed through the cavern. "Wow," Rayton said, laughing. "It looks like you finally broke her. I mean, I thought I was the cruel one. You really know how to annoy someone when you want to. At least I just give them a beating. But this Vorden, this is just pure evil." Vorden knew Rayton was just trying to annoy him by being sarcastic. The problem was it was working. Had Vorden really gone too far? At this point, he had been trying to split Layla and Quinn apart. Still, without saying too much directly to Layla, rather than it being for himself or Quinn, he was doing it for her. What's that noise? Sil said as he stood up from his usual crouched position. The screams from Layla seemed to be so loud that they had even reached Sil, who would usually ignore most things. However, Vorden was too distracted deflecting the projectiles coming towards him to give Sil a reply. As Sil started walking over towards the chair, Rayton smiled and stepped to the side. Now this will be good to see, he said. Sil placed his hand on Vorden's shoulder, who was in the chair. Now they both had access to what was going on outside. Sil could see and feel what Vorden was doing. It looks like you need some help. Swap with me, Sil said. Sil, I can't handle it, Vorden replied carefully. Swap with me, Sil said, his grip tightening on Vorden's shoulder. Knowing that he had no choice, Vorden reluctantly left the seat. Back outside, 4 stones were now being directed towards Vorden's body. So far he had been taking a step back, deflecting them as they came at him, but suddenly, he stood there completely still. As he raised his hands, all of the stones stopped mid-air for a moment. Then at the same time, the 4 stones were repelled away with even greater force. Layla could tell just from the sound they had made when hitting the walls around him. Why are you attacking me? Sil asked. Layla had noticed the sudden change in Vorden's attitude. She had even seen this happen a few times before. At the canteen, while they were fighting in the desert, and now again. Her sudden attacks had stopped. If you are trying to hurt me, then you are against me, Sil said as he lifted both hands and used an incredible force to push Layla's body back. Right now, Sil was combining the MC points in CIA's level 4 ability along with Layla's level 2 ability. His telekinesis powers were that of a level 6. There was no chance at Layla stopping the power. The next moment she was flung against the wall. The back of her head swung back into a piece of rock, and her vision quickly went to black as she passed out on the floor. The problem has been dealt with, Sil said with a smile. In another part of the cavern, 2 more students seemed to be stuck together dealing with their own problems. CIA was taken aback at the sight of Peter's legs all mangled. They had utterly broken, and it looked like part of the bone had splintered through parts of the skin. She turned her head away, unable to look at the sight any longer. Stay here. I will go look for help, CIA said in a panic. You know, if you didn't hold on to me, the fall wouldn't have been as bad, Peter replied in a calm voice. CIA found it strange that it seemed like Peter wasn't affected by this whole ordeal, but she couldn't bear to look at him. Instead, she started to look around the area to see if there was anything she could find. Just like the caverns, the others were stuck in. There were multiple holes and paths to choose from, not knowing which way was out or would lead them to the surface. CIA walked up to the entrances, which were a little away from where they had landed. She wanted to see if she could hear anything coming from down the tunnels. Perhaps some would be filled by beasts, but the others had also been swallowed, and just maybe they weren't too far from them. She tilted her head, with her ear faced forward towards the entrance, seeing if she could hear the slightest sound. I think we should go this way, a voice said stood right behind her. CIA was startled, and out of instinct, she turned and threw her fist, hitting Peter right in the jaw, before taking a few steps to the side. It hadn't hurt Peter, but only slightly moved his head to the side, but a small mark could also be seen across his cheek. P.I.O. But how? Your legs were all mangled just a few seconds ago. Apologize now, Peter demanded. What for the punch? CIA asked. No way. How the hell is that my fault? You snuck up on me when I thought you couldn't move, in a dark and creepy cave with possible beasts. Anyone's reaction would have been the same. Still, should you not apologize if you hit someone? Or am I mistaken? Said Peter. You're weird. Why did I have to get stuck with you? I think you should be a bit nicer to me. After all, if we run into anything down here, then we will be relying on my ability a lot more than yours. CIA still didn't know Peter's ability, but she had a guess. His watch indicated he was a level 4, and if he managed to recover from an injury like that, most likely his ability was a healing one or regenerative one. The only thing she couldn't quite put her finger on was the healing speed. She had never met a healer or seen a regenerative ability that could allow someone to recover that fast. They would be at level 8 to do such a thing. Still, this meant it was clear his ability wasn't a combat one, while CIA's wasn't either. She was sure of her hand-to-hand combat skills over the frail and weak PIO. As she took a step forward, hoping to head to the other side of the cave where the other entrances were, Peter suddenly blocked her path. Wasn't he at least 5 meters away? How did he get here so fast? She thought, if you don't apologize to me and you are going to have a problem, a serious problem. Whatever. CIA said as she tried to walk past Peter. At this moment, she felt something grasp around her throat. When she looked down, she could see a hand, and it was linked to PIO. What are you doing? CIA just managed to let out. Just then, footsteps could be heard coming from one of the tunnels. It was unclear which one, as the echo made it hard to pinpoint the sound. Now PIO, I don't think we should be treating our fellow students like that, do you? The short boy said as he took a bite from one of his favorite sandwiches. As the short-haired boy entered the room, not only did Peter recognize him, but it seemed like CIA did too. For some reason, at the sight of the boy, Peter's grip around CIA's neck had loosened. At this moment, she took the opportunity to try to knock Peter's hand away, using her full force slamming it against Peter's forearm. But in doing so, she realized it had the same effect as moving a rock that weighted a ton. There seemed to be no effect or movement. I think it will be best if you put her down, PIO. Annoying as she may be, it might cause us more problems in the future. Logan said as he took a final bite of his sandwich. That was the last one. At that moment, Logan didn't look like his regular self. Apart from his head that was fully showing, Logan had his full body suit on from the neck down. Due to him not knowing what he might meet down here, he was always prepared for the worst. Still, Logan's was quite popular around the school, even if he didn't know it himself. The few appearances he made on the last outing and during the school's events every once in a while had really caught the attention of other students. This, of course, included CIA. Although CIA was wondering what the connection between Logan and PIO was, right now she just wanted to get away from PIO. Using her ability, she stabbed a spear into Peter's belly. Not just one, but 3. Due to how close she was to him, she was able to stick in multiple spears one after the other. After the first one had entered Peter's body, his movements were slowed, allowing her to put in 2 more. Once again, using all her force, she tried to whack Peter's hand away. Still, it felt like she was pounding her hand against solid rock, but this time with the help of her ability weakening Peter. Her attack was a success and managed to knock his hand away and broke free. Not knowing where to run to, she decided to head down one of the many tunnels. If another student had arrived and had no relation to the person named PIO, then maybe she would have bolted towards Logan, but seeing that the two of them had some type of a relationship, she didn't want to risk it. The cave was dark and it was hard for her to see, but each of the tunnels gave off a little reflection of light. What she didn't know, there was always the chance that the small amount of light could be radiating from a beast, or it could just be a raw crystal. Because of this, as CIA ran, she needed to be careful about her footing, not being able to see where or what she was taking steps into. It was a cave and they were deep underground, with the floors being uneven and traveling in the dark. CIS was being naturally cautious. This is a pain. I wish I brought some type of light with me or something. CIA complained. The group did have emergency equipment and rations such as torches and so on, but they were all kept with Peter. Taking another step forward, her foot seemed to be lodged between something. She quickly managed to pull it, but it had greatly slowed her down. This is such a pain in the ass. Whatever I have to deal with, though, he will too. CIA thought. Why did you choose to run? Logan said. 3, 2, 1. As Logan finished counting down, Peter was already directly in front of CIA. Somehow the difficult pathway that she had taken was easily navigated by him. There was no touch in his hand, no light source. So just how did Peter manage to catch up with her so fast? Peter decided to wait until the spirit spears had disappeared before chasing CIA. Not only that, but just like Quinn, Peter also had the advantage of seeing in the dark. For him, it was as if the cave was lit up, so he had no problem deciding on the quickest path to take. Just when he found her, he heard Logan shouting, "PIO." When Peter turned around, he could see Logan holding his hand out. But on the end of his hand was a rounded and strange bright green light, getting larger as the moment went on. It was Logan's hand blaster, and Peter had seen what it could do before when it was fired against Fex. Someone who is stronger than both him and Quinn. Perhaps, even his regeneration abilities wouldn't be able to keep up with this. You stop running, will you? Logan complained while looking at CIA. While the blaster was held against Peter, he decided to let the thing go. He wasn't stupid and could always find a way to get to CIA later. What are you doing down here? Peter asked. At this point, CIA was unsure of what to do. The entrance to another tunnel wasn't too far away, but it seemed like Logan was able to control Peter just like Quinn could somehow. She still didn't understand how Peter managed to catch up to her so fast, so her only option was to stay by Logan's side. She scuttled along around the side until she was eventually behind Logan. Logan then tapped something on the side of his suit, which brightened up the area around him with green lights. The pieces on Logan's equipment were illuminating a small 5-meter radius around them. I adjusted the scanner the school gave us to increase its radius. I had to power it with my own beast crystals and don't get any points for doing that, but to me it was well worth it, said Logan. That's when I discovered that there seemed to be strange tunnels underground, but they didn't quite look natural, so I decided to investigate. I never thought anyone else would be down here, so it was a nice surprise to see you. Do you know the way out? CIA asked, realizing from what Logan said he should have a wide area mapped out using his scanner. No, Logan replied, although this was a lie. If he had told the truth, he knew they would ask to lead him out of here. But Logan had discovered something on his scanner that he had to check out before leaving. Somewhere inside the large cave, Fex and Quinn had decided to walk down one of the tunnels. While inside the tunnel, the connection between Peter seemed to be lost. It had happened ever since he went underground. Quinn thought that it might have something to do with the distance between the two at the moment, as he didn't know that Peter and the others were underground as well. Thinking that help would never arrive, they decided to just leave it up to fate and pick the tunnel with the biggest entrance. As they walked down the tunnel, they noticed that the walls were surrounded with thin blue crystals that gave off a slight glow to them. Not enough to light up the whole area, but one could follow the small light source quite easily. What are these? Quinn asked, looking at the small crystals. They resemble something similar to beast crystals, but Quinn thought the only way to obtain beast crystals was killing a beast. I really don't know, Fex replied. I was going to ask you the same thing. The curiosity had gotten the better of him, and Quinn decided to place his hand on top of the crystal. At first, he was planning to use his inspect skill, but there was no need, for the system had automatically given him a message. Basic tier crystal. Would you like to store in your system? The shock from the message was quite immense. At school, they had been taught that the beast crystals could only be obtained from beasts. This was why the human race had been sending hunting parties to slay the beasts. Even though there was the chance of death, these crystals could be used to create powerful weapons and even power their modern equipment. But right here, crystals were just forming on the wall around him, and it wasn't just one crystal. There seemed to be hundreds of crystals through the tunnel they had just walked. If Quinn was to think about all the other tunnels as well, there would at least be thousands down here. With Fex keeping an eye over his back, Quinn was unable to store it in his system. However, he did pull the crystal out and placed it in his trouser pocket for later. It might be something important, Quinn said. Fex just shrugged his shoulders, uninterested by the small crystal, and carried on walking ahead. Finally, they had reached the end of the tunnel. When exiting the tunnel, the small discovery that Quinn had just made before seemed to be nothing compared to this. The two boys froze for a moment once they exited from the tunnel. Looking at what lay in front of their eyes, they paused for a moment. Somehow it didn't feel like they were actually really underground. Hey, can you see what I'm seeing right now, man? Fex asked. If you're talking about those buildings right in front of us, then of course I can. Quinn replied. Exiting from the tunnel, it seemed like they'd arrived at what looked like a type of town. It was impossible for them to measure how large the entire place was. Buildings stretched out far and wide, and it was comparably as large as any one of the shelters they've seen before. If they were to give a rough estimate, it looked like a few thousand people used to live in such an establishment. The ceiling seemed to be unreachable. Although they could see the peak, it felt like there was no way to reach it. Their gaze moved on towards the tallest building that stood in the center of the place. It was a round tower-like structure that was tall and high, but it hardly touched the ceiling. If one wished to even touch the ceiling, They would have to build a similar-sized building and place it on top of the already existing tower. Although a town underneath a mountain and town was surprising to them, both it didn't seem impossible. There were rumors of such shelters being built on other planets where the temperatures could reach extreme levels at different times of year. Underground shelters were the only answer to such uninhabitable places. And so the reason why both of them were shocked was for a different reason entirely. The two of them could already observe that the design and materials used to create the buildings were different. One of the main features was the solid black material that it was made from. Instead of brick, cement, or metal, it was a different kind. A special black substance that was more stable and stronger was the primary material of all the buildings. The substance was said to be just as strong as galthrium. Although the place looked abandoned and was void of people, the buildings were a different matter. The structures themselves looked perfectly fine and hadn't deteriorated a single bit. The only semblance of passage of time of abandonment was a layer of dust or rock-like substance from the ceiling that coated the top of everything. And finally, the design. Although the substance was strong, it wasn't as flexible and nimble as galthrium. This meant that the edges weren't smoothed out, giving everything that was made a slight rocky look. After looking at the buildings, the two of them had both come to the conclusion that the structures built in front of them were not made by humans. This was the true reason why both of them were in shock. They had Dalki structures, Quinn muttered. This was a huge discovery. The humans had only built a shelter and classified the place as an orange portal due to them thinking they had discovered the planet first. There were rare cases like this when the two opposition were trying to take control of a planet at the same time. If the two groups were to meet, regardless if there was a treaty signed or not, a fight would break out until one side was completely annihilated. As Fex heard these words come out from Quinn's mouth, though, there was confusion on his face. "Oh, what are you on about?" Fex replied, "These aren't Dalki structures. They're vampire structures." Hearing these words equally shocked Quinn again. He was almost positive these were Dalki structures. He had seen them in his lessons and on the news time and time again. "The boy is right," the system replied. "These resemble the structures that were built in my time." The system didn't really answer any of the questions Quinn had right now and only confused him even more. "Fex, have you ever seen Dalki structures?" Quinn asked. There was one possibility, Quinn thought. Perhaps the two structures were similar and Quinn himself was being confused. Maybe there was something that he couldn't spot. "Actually, no. I'll be honest. Maybe you know more about the Dalki because you live on Earth, but we don't even really get taught about them. I've never seen a Dalki either. Only heard them being mentioned from time to time by one of the elders." From Fex's answer, there seemed to be a couple of possibilities. The fact that the Dalki and vampires use the same material, perhaps their technologies are on par with each other, and it would make sense why their structures look similar. The strange black substance. The humans were never able to figure out just how to use it properly, so they stuck to using galthrium over it. The other possibility was somehow the Dalki and vampires were linked together, but this seemed even more far-fetched, especially since Fex didn't even really know what a Dalki was. "Well, do you know why the vampire and Dalki structures look so similar?" Quinn asked, hoping to find an answer. Also, if it is a vampire structure, why did they build one here underground? They do? Well, that's strange. I'll be honest, I'm not the best person to ask. When it comes to vampires, I'm really young. I'm sure the elders or others will know the answer to your question, or maybe even a better student. I never paid attention in class. Fex said, laughing nervously. For your second question, I really don't know either. It looks like this place has been here a while. Maybe it was one of the planets the vampires used before, moving to another. It would make sense why it was built underground in the first place as well. What about you, system? Did the Dalki exist during your time? Quinn asked in his head. The Dalki did not exist while I was still active, the system replied. Quinn made a small note in his head about how the system replied. It seemed the choice of words it had used was oddly specific, but he knew if he pressed further, the system would just give his usual resistance. "There's one thing we can do," Quinn said. "Why don't we check out some of the buildings? Maybe there will be something inside which will tell us if it was the Dalkis who made this or the vampires. I'm especially interested to see what they would have in that tower structure." "Hey, it looks like you read my mind," Fex replied with a chuckle. The two of them started to walk through the strange building structures. and the more they started to walk, the more it looked like a town to the both of them. There were streets with buildings lined up on both sides. If you followed the streets far enough, it would eventually lead them to one of the tunnels they had come through. When looking around at the walls, it looked like there were several tunnels that lead to the town. The two of them had entered some of the first few houses, but they seemed to be void on any items whatsoever. There weren't even beds inside, but it was clear they were normal family structures. As Quinn entered the place, he could imagine a family living here, with all the different rooms, but while looking at the place, he just wondered what happened here. They entered a few more buildings on their way, but still they seemed to find nothing. Eventually, they decided to no longer enter the small buildings, as it seemed to be a waste of time. If they were going to find anything, it would be in the tower structure near the middle. For the first time, as they got closer to the tower, it looked like some of the buildings had been destroyed, as if they had taken part in a battle. The top of them had crumbled to the ground, and some structures no longer existed. Seeing this caused Fex to worry a little. He knew how tough the material was, and if something was able to destroy that, they needed to have some level of strength. They continued to walk down the street. They still had some distance to go, but the tower could be seen directly in front of them. Just then, the sound of growling could be heard coming from the sides. "Where's that sound coming from?" Quinn said. They could both hear the growling clearly, but it seemed like there were several of them, and if he was right, they were currently surrounded. "I guess it's time to call on some extra help." Fex touched his ear and pulled on his dangling earring. Suddenly, in the palm of his hand, the earring started to glow until eventually it started to change its shape, forming what looked like a cross between a bull and bat. "I'm here at your service," the bull said excitedly as it flew in a circle. It had been a while since Fex had last used Ham, and he was starting to miss his little companion. Ham was able to be seen by anybody. He didn't have any special skills that allowed him to turn invisible or hide his presence, but he was able to transform. If the students saw a flying bull-like creature, it would have immediately caused alarm bells to ring, and there would be a hunt for a beast inside of school. This was why Fex had also kept him hidden as an earring. But right now they were underground. It was unlikely any other students would be down here, and even if they were, it wouldn't be so strange to see a beast flying around on a beast planet. All Fex would have to do was pretend he didn't know his companion and later meet up with him again. Finally, I get to spread my wings about." Ham cheered. Quinn had so many questions he wanted to ask Fex right now. He was curious about the little beast and wondered if it had been with Fex the whole time, what it could do, and if every vampire was able to get some type of companion. The problem was Quinn was unable to tell what was the norm with vampires and what wasn't. He could ask the system, but it wasn't the right time. "Can you sense what's around us?" Fex asked. Ham closed its eyes, allowing it to concentrate. "I think some beasts are surrounding us," Ham replied. "We know that." Fex shouted. "We wanted to know how many and how strong. If you aren't going to help, then you are better off on my ear as a fashion accessory." Ham responded to the complaints by pulling out its fairly large and fat tongue. "This place is disturbing the flow of my powers." Ham started to look around at where they were. "Wait till we back home." "You really are useless," Fex said. While in the earring, Ham was able to see everything that was going on outside, as long as he was paying attention, and him saying this made it clear that he wasn't. While the two of them were busy arguing, the creatures that were busy growling away at them from the dark and behind the crumbled buildings had revealed themselves. The two boys were completely surrounded by what looked like strange dog-like creatures. There were more than 20 and possibly even more in hiding. The dogs had no fur but displayed a slight tint of red on Thea's skin. Thea's tungies were left out hanging wide from their mouth dangling, a bit longer than regular dogs and a little pointed. However, the thing that looked creepy about them most was the fact that the dogs had no eyes. The long tongue with Thea's teeth showing, but nothing where their eyes were meant to be, was quite the frightening sight. Inspect. Although Ham was unable to give them the information they wanted, the same couldn't be said for Quinn. A basic T-beast, furry hound. Oh, a beast who is blind but has sensitive hearing. It is able to locate its enemy's position even with the quietest of footsteps. It will often use its long tongue for attacks. The tongue is stronger than most. Seeing this information put a smile on Quinn's face. If it was an intermediate T-beast or higher, Quinn didn't know what to do. Now he only had one thought on his mind. It's grinding time. Now unafraid of the beasts, Quinn wanted to get a kill in before Fex, just in case no one had killed the beast before. Immediately, Quinn lifted his leg, ready to perform the crescent roundhouse blood kick. Wait, Quinn, we don't know how strong they are yet. It might be best if we just run. Fex shouted out, but it was too late. Quinn had finished his motion, and the attack had already left his leg. The distance between him and the beast wasn't great, but Quinn chose to use the blood kick to try to finish the beast in one strike. Hearing the attack through the air, the dog prepared to jump away, but it was too slow, and as it turned, its body was sliced in half. 10 EXP gained. Our third time killing beast, furry hound. 100 bonus EXP gained. 2640 3200 EXP. Quinn had received the bonus points for killing a new creature, but he did not obtain any more bonus points. It was expected since the beast was in some type of establishment. They likely had contact with something else that had killed it before. When thinking about this, he felt lucky that he even got the first kill bonus on the rock beast above ground. Seeing how easy Quinn dealt with the beast, Fex decided to step it up a gear as well. Ham above. Fex shouted, and immediately, Ham flew up in the sky. Fex then leapt in the air and attached one of his strings to the ring around Ham's nose. As Ham rose up into the air, so did Fex, and now he could see the hounds in the area form below. Have you gained some weight? You haven't just been pigging out, have you? Ham complained as he struggled to lift the young master. Shut up. You've just gotten weaker. From above, Fex was easily able to see his targets. As he detached himself and started swirling down, he precisely knew where to throw out his pieces of strings. Harden, as the strings fell, a power surging through him left his body and was inserted into the strings, now making them just as hard and sharp as a sword. When Fex landed, the strings went down with him, slicing the hounds to pieces. 5 of the hounds were killed in an instant. Quinn continued to battle it out with hounds. While doing so, he was cautious about using his blood abilities. They were underground, and there was no telling when they would get out of here. He didn't want a similar situation happening like last time. So instead, Quinn stuck to the basics, attacking with both the basic vampire and human martial arts. His stats that had been inputted into strength and his intermediate tier equipment was enough to allow him to easily deal with the beasts. One of the dogs swung its head out, wrapping its tongue around Quinn's gauntlet. It tried to pull using its strength, but when Quinn didn't move an inch, the dog looked slightly confused. Then, he pulled his arm with all his might, and the dog's tongue was completely dislodged from its mouth. The sight looked cruel, but they had been the first ones to attack. Finally, all the hounds in the area had been defeated. Fex had defeated 15 of them, while Quinn 8. There seemed to be more, but after seeing many of their own kind defeated, they quickly rushed off. When comparing the two numbers, Quinn could tell that he still wasn't quite at Fex level, but with improvements in his shadow ability and others, he could tell he wasn't far off. 2720 3200 EXP. After defeating the dogs, Quinn decided to collect the crystals. Fex didn't look too bothered. Basic tier crystals weren't worth his time, but Quinn still thought they might come in handy when creating a weapon from the system. Boss, you're not planning to head to that tower, are you? Ham said as it flew up in the air. With its little hoof, it started to rub its nose. When pulling Fex up using the ring, it had made his nose a little sore. Yeah, we wanted to find out a few things. Maybe there's a map or something telling us the way out of here. Why, what's wrong? Fex said. I think there might be danger there, Ham replied. I thought you said you can't sense anything down here. Fex asked, annoyed. I can't, but something in my gut is telling me. While Ham and Fex were busy talking, a notification screen appeared directly in front of Quinn. 5 EXP shared. It was a message that he had never received before, and he found it strange that it came up while he had done nothing. When reading the message carefully, it made Quinn think back to what the system had mentioned. Quinn would gain EXP as long as Peter had killed something and was nearby. Without thinking about it, Peter and CIA naturally both started to follow Logan around while they were inside the cavern. It felt normal to be led by him. CIA didn't know why. Maybe it was his tone of his voice that shined with confidence, or perhaps because he was the only light source that she could depend on. In a way, her savior in more ways than one while down here. She also still had the fear that if she left Logan's side, that Pio might lash out at her any second now. She hadn't done much, but there had already been several instances where she had angered him. At first, she didn't think it would be a big deal. Even though her ability was a support type, she was able to handle her own many times against those around a similar level to her. But something about Pio caused fear in her. With all this going on, she is now even too afraid to ask for the torches that were placed in Pio's bag. She thought once he brought them out for himself she could ask, but he never did. Logan continued to walk confidently, leading the way. He knew exactly where he wanted to go as he picked one of the tunnels without checking the others. When coming down here, for whatever reason the scanner seemed to stop working, but using his trusty memory, he knew where he wanted to go. It wasn't a hard decision for him anyway. All of the tunnels on one side would lead to other rooms like this one, while all the other tunnels all led to the same place. He continued to wear the suit, and he even had it protecting his head this time while walking through the tunnel. While traveling, their group also discovered the same type of blue crystals that had been embedded into the wall. Naturally, Logan decided to take one for research, but he already had an idea of what it was just by looking at it. Peter didn't really care for it, and CIA, although interested, had a lot more concerns on her mind right now. After exiting the tunnel, they too could see the magnificent sight of the strange town, and although it came as a surprise to the other two, Logan had already expected this. It was exactly what had come up on the scanner. Before even thinking about going up and getting out of here, he needed to visit this place. How could he pass the opportunity to do some research on some Dalki architecture? The blue crystals seemed to be randomly scattered through the city, lighting up certain building and wall areas. It wasn't enough to be called a light source, but allowed CIA just to see the outline of a few buildings. The one place that could be seen the clearest was the tower that stood in the center, like a beaming torch in the middle. It had the most amount of crystal on the very top, illuminating it in the dark. No, doesn't this mean the Dalki were here before us? CIA looked like she was about to collapse onto the floor. We need help. We need to call the sergeant somehow. This looks like a whole town. What if this is an army base? Relax, Logan replied. Although my scanner doesn't work down here, when I checked from above, there didn't seem to be any type of civilization living here, although there were other things. CIA wanted to question what Logan meant by other things, but she already knew the answer and thought it would just be foolish. He was talking about beasts. Without saying anything to the others, Logan started to walk down the path onto the street. Peter also decided to follow without saying anything. The two of them walked in the middle of the street fearlessly. While looking at their backs, CIA couldn't help but think they were crazy. However, as Logan walked away, so did the light source that was surrounding her. The darkness around started to creep in. It felt almost suffocating, and she couldn't help but think something was watching her. *Jow. What was that? CIA thought as she quickly turned her head towards the noise. Although she couldn't see anything, the sound of something scurrying off in a certain direction could be heard. She couldn't take it anymore, and she too ran towards Logan and continued to move forward. After checking a few buildings, Logan had come to the conclusion that there was nothing of worth from the buildings around him. However, when using his scanner from above, he was able to see all of the building structures and things around it, but that he was unable to see what was inside the tower. This, of course, just made Logan even more curious. As they got closer to the tower, Logan transformed his robotic arms into 2 round blasters. What was that? Did you see something? CIA asked. When scanning this area earlier, I found that the beasts seemed to be concatenated around the tower. Strange, right? Low-level beasts don't usually have a form of high intelligence. They hunt, sleep, and eat. Sometimes they do this in packs and might have a type of territory, but this seems oddly specific. In a place as large as this, and with many beasts, usually there would be several territories and maybe several packs. So why are they all centered around the tower? As if they were guarding it, or gathering around it for some reason. CIA had disregarded most of what Logan had said. The only thing she had heard was they were heading to an area where beasts seemed to be, and she was wondering if she had made the right decision to follow the two in the first place. As they continued to walk down the street, suddenly, Peter took of running straight off to the side into one of the buildings. This sudden movement was even a surprise for Logan, for he had yet to see anything. He had gone into the darkness and the others were unable to see him. Logan did have night vision equipment built into his helmet to help him see, but it was grainy and didn't allow him to see far ahead. A few moments later, and Peter returned holding what looked like a dog in his hand. Black blood splattered over him and the dog being carried lifeless. "They've been following us," Peter said, "and more are coming." It didn't take long after Peter's warning, because Logan and even CIA could now see several dogs in view. Without hesitation, both Logan and CIA started to attack the dogs. She threw out spears, slowing the ones jumping towards her and leaping out of the way, while Logan was able to fire out beams of energy that knocked the dogs away, finishing them in one blast. Logan's blasters were effective when it came to basic T-beasts, but things at a much higher level or the Dalki, they would pretty much be non-effective. The suit itself was made from beast gear mixed in with technological parts. His blasters and the energy coming out from them were not made from beast gear. It had the same effect as explosions of the past. The problem was that Dalki and higher-tier beasts had a resistance to this. Seeing that they were lower-tiered beasts, Logan didn't hold back, blasting his beams of energy at each and every one of them. Soon they realized there wasn't much for Peter and CIA to do. Peter had managed to defeat a couple more, but Logan would blast most of them away before they even got close. Eventually, the beasts stopped leaping through the air, and Logan stopped using his blasters. There was a limited supply of energy, and if they stopped attacking, then Logan would do the same. However, something strange was occurring. They had managed to kill around 30 different dogs in total. Both Peter and Logan could see that there was still plenty around them. Still, they didn't run away but stood there at the edge of the street next to the buildings, growling. "Why aren't they attacking?" CIA asked. "That is something I would like to know the answer to as well." Logan replied. On closer inspection, it seemed like the dogs were no longer looking at them. Instead, they were facing to the street, looking out towards the tower in front of them. "They're shaking," Peter said. "The beasts, I can tell they are scared." From the street, the sounds of footsteps could be heard. Whatever was coming towards them was frightening the beasts even more, because with each footstep, it looked like the beasts were pulling back slightly. Even Logan, a level 8 user who was defeating each of the beasts in one go, didn't have the same effect. Finally, the figure was starting to come into view. From out of the shadow, a dark outline could be seen. It had a human outline shape, but it was still hard to make out. Still, Logan was sure on one thing. It was clear it wasn't human, it was a beast. For the first time during the drip, Logan started to sweat heavily in his suit. If a beast had a humanoid figure, it meant one thing. The opponent they were about to face was at least at the king tier. After collecting the beast crystal from the defeated hounds, Quinn had suddenly received the message about obtaining EXP. He had figured out that the EXP he just gained must have been from Peter. It was the only thing that made sense, and would also explain why the system had used the word share. This meant one thing, that Peter was close. He didn't know how or why Peter was down here as well, but if he had to guess, Peter probably chose to come down here to follow him. It was strange though, even though the system was able to pick up the EXP points from Peter, Quinn was still unable to sense Peter's presence like he could when he was above ground. "What's wrong?" Fex asked as he could see it looked like Quinn was deep in thought. Quinn wanted to go searching for Peter. He didn't know how far away he needed to be for the system to pick up the EXP, but the fact that he even got experience points in the first place meant right now he was fighting other beasts. "I think I might have spotted a strange-looking building over in that direction," said Quinn. "Do you mind if we check it out first before going to the tower?" Fex shrugged his shoulders and replied, "Hey, it's not like we know how to get out of this place anyway." Both of Thea's eyesights were as good as each other. Nearly all vampires could see as well. The only thing that improved as they grew stronger were Thea's senses. Perhaps a stronger vampire would be able to sense energy in a specific direction, but in terms of how far or well they could see in the dark, it was near all the same. When looking in the direction that Quinn had pointed to, Fex could see nothing that looked out of the ordinary. Still, Fex was curious why the sudden change in direction. As they were closer to the tower, the area around it wasn't as wide. If Quinn was to go in a circle, Perhaps he would be able to spot them. Without his senses, there was no way to tell which direction to go in. As Quinn was thinking about it, another message appeared. 5 EXP shared. The message just confirmed that Peter was still in combat. Peter was strong, but if he was surrounded by multiple basic tier beasts like they were just moments ago, he wouldn't get out of it unscratched. Even with his super healing, it would mean he would eventually have to consume human flesh once again. So Quinn picked a random direction and headed off. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. Slowly, Layla's eyes started to open. Her vision was blurry at first, but what stood out to her was the pain on the back of her head. She instinctively placed her hand, and the stinging was worse. When looking at her hand, dried particles of blood had rubbed off onto it. It was hard to see in the dark, but she knew from the feeling. "Are you okay?" Vorden asked. As she looked up, her vision had returned, and she could see the person who had put her in this situation, standing right next to her. "Get away from me," Layla said in a panic. She pushed her feet of the floor against her, and once again, her head had banged into the wall. Vorden did as asked and slowly backed away, seeing that she was panicked. She had already been hurt, and Vorden didn't want to cause any more pain. "Calm down. I'm not going to hurt you," Vorden said. The sound of sobbing could be heard. Layla had planted her head between her knees and let out all the emotions away. "Why are you only like this to me?" she cried. Seeing Layla like this, Vorden felt ache and pain in his heart. He never wanted her to get hurt. "I'm sorry," Vorden said. The sobbing started to stop, and Layla began to get a grip on her emotions. It seemed like Vorden was back to his usual self. The air around him that she noticed in the past was no longer there, but she knew it could flick like a switch. It was as if he was bipolar. Seeing that Vorden was okay now, and not wanting to step on his toes, she thought maybe she could find out the reason. It wasn't normal to be like this, and at the pure base, she had seen cases similar to him. It was going to be hard for her. Her hands couldn't stop trembling, as someone far more powerful than she stood right in front of her. A wrong move or word could end her life, and she really felt like it. "Vorden, are you okay? Sometimes it seems like you suddenly change. I want to believe you when you say you don't mean to hurt me. But when I end up like this..." As Layla spoke, her voice was shaky. She tried her best to hide it, but Vorden could feel the fear. Lately, the changes happening to Vorden had become more frequent. In the past, he remained in control most of the time, but there were plenty of times recently where he needed to rely on the others for help. And now, for the first time in a while, Syl was actively asking for a seat. As these changes happened, it was expected that people would start to notice. The worst thought in his mind was the possibility of one of the others taking control of the seat. They didn't have the social skills that Vorden possessed to keep up his image. If they took over, he wouldn't know what to do. "When I first met Quinn, I knew he was different," Vorden replied. "Perhaps, for the same reasons you were attracted to him, I was too. He was plain, a level 1 user, but had this look in his eyes that said he still had fight in him, not like the others. Of course, at the time, I didn't know he was a vampire. In my old school, there were quite a few Quinns. They were the same. They still had hope, still had fight in them, but eventually they were broken down and beaten, submitted to the system just like everyone else. It was rare to see someone make it into military school without already being broken. You could even see it with Peter. I was sick of it, sick of everything, and decided if I could at least save one person, it would be enough for me. Maybe I could show Quinn that even as a level 1 user, not everyone treated you the same, and you could make it through in the world. Then I got wrapped up in all this vampire business." It was a good explanation, and Layla could tell there was some truth behind Vorden's words, but she could also tell that he was missing out some key points and details. The question was, why though? What does that have to do with me though? Can't we both get along with Quinn? Layla asked. "Are you jealous or something?" "Not me," Vorden mumbled, too quiet for Layla to hear. "I haven't exactly had the best of experiences since coming here," Vorden replied. "I was tied up and beaten by the second years, shoved to a red portal planet, and now stuck down here. I think it's normal to be a bit unstable after what we have been through." As Vorden finished what he was saying, he took a step forward. Layla reacted by shuffling her knees closer towards herself, curling into a ball. The sight of this reminded him of Seal, and in a sweet, calming voice, he did what he usually did without thinking about it. Vorden started to sing. "It will be okay. I will make your worries go away. I am by your side. I will always be kind." As she listened to the soft, angelic voice, without realizing it, Vorden was already next to her once again. Her hands had stopped trembling. "What was that?" she asked. "An ability." Vorden started to laugh. "It was a song my mother used to sing to me to calm me down." He gently lifted his hand and touched her head, bringing it down and closer towards his chest. All his movements were so soft as he inspected the wound. It was a side of Vorden she had never seen before. "I like this, Vorden," Layla said. This was the first time that Logan had ever felt panic. Due to him having night vision in his helmet he was wearing, he was able to see the beast before it came into view. Peter could as well, but was unaware of the magnitude of horror they were about to face. Perhaps Peter didn't study as well at school and thought it was just a regular beast, or when he had evolved everything about him changed. Right now it didn't look like he could feel fear like the others. Beasts were separated into different tiers. The tiers were based on the crystals that were embedded in their body. The more powerful the crystal, the higher the tier of the beast. This, however, didn't always mean they were stronger. Depending on the beast's structure or abilities, sometimes in rare cases, there were those that were more difficult to deal with. This was unlikely the case because a higher tier beast would be able to draw more power from the crystal. Basic tier, intermediate tier, advanced tier, and right now, they were about to face something that was at least at king tier level. There were levels above this, including the highest level ever given, demon tier. Throughout history, whenever a beast that had a humanoid shape was discovered, they would at least be at the king tier level or above. There were still beasts that were at this level that didn't have a humanoid shape, but a humanoid-type beast has never been lower than a king tier. Knowing that he would need everyone's help, Logan immediately changed one of his blaster's shapes slightly, allowing it to be more narrow. The armor shifted at a fantastic speed, and when it had finished transforming, Logan quickly fired 3 blasts into the buildings around them. The shots weren't energy blasts like before. Instead, these were sticky light balls. They allowed a considerable amount of light to be shown and would easily stick onto whatever object they hit. There were 2 reasons for Logan doing this. One was to allow them to see their opponent more easily. If a creature came from the dark, their eyes and senses should be adjusted to the environment down here. He needed to even the playing field, and it would also allow CIA to help them. The second reason was related to the feist. The sticky lights had been shot in a triangle formation around them. One to the left, one to the right, and one slightly behind where the King T beast was standing. This lit up the entire street. Although the dogs couldn't see the strange light, they could feel it and were frightened away. What Logan had also hoped for was that the light source would hurt or blind the King T beast's sensitive eyes, but it seemed to have no effect as it continued to walk forward. "What is that thing?" CIA said, trembling. Now that there was a light source, CIA could see what Logan could see, and she knew straight away the danger of the beast. "Should we run?" she asked, looking for an answer from Logan, who seemed to be the only one acting. "Run. There's no point running. The moment we turn our back, we will die," Peter said. Hearing this, Logan realized Peter was perhaps more aware of the situation than he had thought. He just knew there was nothing they could do. The beast slowly continued to walk towards the group, and by now all of the dogs in the area had already scurried away. Now not only could the beast's outer shape be seen, but all of its details were in view. Although it had an outer human shape, it was a bit on the larger end. It stood around 8 feet tall. Its body was twisted and strange as if it was made of mud and rocks, and at the top where its head should be, the muscle structure of the creature was outlined with plant roots, while the rest just looked like a mound of mud. What was frightening about it, though, was in the upper mound part of its body. Several human skeletons could be seen half sunken into its body and half sticking out. A skull, a ribcage, and other parts as well. It was as if the beast had been made from all the parts around it. Finally, on its 2 long arms, there were no fingers as such. Instead, They were long and sharp like a blade. From the forearm downward, it looked like the mud tree-like material changed into a harder substance. The blade shined green in color like a hard jade. CIA, PIO. Logan shouted, "Buy me sometime." Logan was unprepared to meet something like this down here. He thought that if the school was prepared to send some students to an orange portal planet, they would have at least sent them to one, where only at most the advanced T-level beasts had been reported to be seen. There was no point attacking the beast with his current blasters. It would do nothing. What Logan needed to do was get his most powerful weapon and suit on, but it would take some time. His suit started to break down into the little spiders. They were eventually all scattered on the floor. From the ground up, they started to rebuild a different type of suit right in front of him. "Come on faster, you guys," Logan said. "I know you usually do your best, but right now I need you more than ever." The unconfirmed king-tier beast continued to slowly walk as if it was a king taking a stroll through its own kingdom. Peter could see Logan's spiders building something, and knew their best chance of survival right now was relying on him. If they wanted to live, they needed to do what was asked of them. CIA could see Peter was about to move forward and shouted, "No, wait. The thing still hasn't attacked us yet. Maybe if we don't attack it, it will just continue walking past us." Peter took a look at the beast. It had now stopped walking forward and stood in the middle of the street. It placed one of its bladed hands in front of the other and scraped them against each other. A slight screeching sound could be heard as the beast continued to do this process. "No," Peter said. "It already considers us intruders. It will continue to attack us until we're gone. I can tell." With those words said, Peter threw his bag on his back to the ground and dashed forward. It was at an incredible speed that Peter had not displayed until this point, and it was even a surprise to him. This was because Quinn had gotten stronger, and in return, Peter's own stats had increased. Usually, Peter would do his best to hide his abilities. The speed he was running at right now was not possible for a human who wasn't wearing any beast gear or didn't have any ability. But it wasn't the time to hide their powers. It was a matter of life and death. Although CIA was frightened, she wasn't stupid. She too got into position, dashing towards one of the sides of the building. While doing so, she threw out her spirit spears. "Please hit," she prayed. If the beast was indeed a king tier, then there wasn't much chance that her spears would be able to hit her target. However, the beast continued to stand there and allowed the spears to be lodged into its upper part of its body. "Is it going easy on us?" she thought. At the same time, she wondered what Peter was planning to do. He held no beast weapons and only had his regenerative ability. He would be killed in a matter of moments. When Peter was in range, the beast swung down its blade hand. Using all his strength, Peter swung both his fists together like a tennis racket. "This is it," CIA said. "No human has the strength to match a beast with their bare hands." As the hands met with the side of the blade, the power was surprisingly equal. The blades were knocked away, but Peter hadn't budged. "What is going on? Who is this person?" CIA said, surprised. The beast was confused itself. When fighting, it would purposely match its strength based on the opponent in front of it. It was sure it had gauged Peter well. What it didn't account for was the spirit spears in its body. Making the adjustment in its power, it swung its blade faster and stronger with its other hand. Peter was unable to do anything. All he could see now was the dark black ceiling above. Peter's legs had been cleanly cut off. The fear in CIA's heart only grew even more, as for a moment she felt like she had tricked herself when she saw how PIO was somehow able to match the strength of the beast. She didn't know how, she didn't know why, but she felt like maybe they had a chance to get out of here alive. However, the beast was simply toying with them. The next attack from the beast was a lot faster than the previous one, and now Peter's legs had been completely detached from his body. It was a strange sight to see, as the beast was towering over Peter originally. Although his bladed hands were long, it seemed like the roots that were attached to the hard part of the creature could extend and retract. It was hard for her to confirm this theory of Hayes. Science, everything seemed to happen in an instant, and she was still trying to get over the shock. Even with her sprint speed inside the beast, it had little to no effect. She felt like her attacks were useless. The beast continued to walk forward, ignoring Peter on the ground. CIA then noticed that its body seemed to be facing in a certain direction. It had chosen its next target. It was looking at Logan. The suit's creation was almost done. It was mostly silver in color, matching that of the spider's. Unlike the previous one, which was quite large and bulky, looking almost mech-like. This one suited Logan's body shape and stature more. Only the last part remained, which was the head. Logan saw the beast coming towards him and decided to quickly place his body into the suit being made. He planned on allowing the spiders to complete the final part. On the top of his hands were 2 circular rings. Around the edge of the rings were small little metallic claws that looked similar to a tooth. "It's still not active," said Logan, looking at the circular rings. "The suit needs to be complete before I can do anything. Just a few more seconds." Taking another step, the beast suddenly felt something grabbing onto its leg. As it looked down, it could see the opponent that it had already defeated. Peter continued to grasp at the tree trunk-like leg as hard as he could. Once again, the beast looked down. This time, when lifting up its arm, it started to extend above its own head. CIA realized that she was indeed not imagining things. The beast could retract and extend its limbs. As the beast swung downward, CIA squinted. She couldn't watch anymore. Still, she needed to. When she opened her eyes once again, Peter's arm had been removed from his body. "Peter," Logan said. The suit of armor had been completed. The suit was mostly silver in color, and the top helmet part covering the head was a single pane of glass going from the chin up to the top of the head. The chest was plated in a green metal, while the 2 circles on top of his hands were also outlined in green. "This won't be enough," Logan predicted after witnessing the fight between Peter and the beast. He had seen Peter fight in the VR game, and he could gauge his strength. There was still one more thing Logan needed. A weapon. A strange square-like device was attached to Logan's belt. He chucked the strange object on the floor, and it suddenly expanded into what looked like a large chest. Logan quickly grabbed some crystals from the chest. "Otherwise might think this is a waste, but our lives are on the line." After taking out the crystals, the device returned to its original size, and a robotic spider jumped up, retuning it around his waist. After placing the 2 crystals into the top part of his hand, the green-like circles started to glow. A female robotic voice sounded inside his head. 2 intermediate-tier crystals detected. An energy weapon is being generated. Still needs more time. Looks like it needs more time than I had previously predicted. That or the worry inside me is making me feel like this is taking forever," Logan said. The beast was now only a few meters away from Logan's position. The problem was, now that he knew the beast was able to extend its limbs, it was hard for him to gauge its true attack range distance. After analyzing his opponent, Logan felt like this suit was the best against it, but he was beginning to have second thoughts whether or not he had chosen the right decision. The suit he used most of the time was equally balanced when it came to power, defense, and speed. The suit he had formed now focused on attack power. After seeing what the creature looked like, he thought it was the best option. With a small body frame and arms for weapons, he wanted to fight fire with fire. However, now that he knew it had some range, perhaps something speed-oriented would have been better. The other problem was, the suit was pretty useless when it came to defense, and right now his weapon hadn't even finished forming. Just as Logan was planning to make a dash for it, a familiar voice shouted from behind the beast. "Hey, if you want to forget about me, you have to make sure you've killed me first," Peter shouted. As CIA turned her head to look at who was shouting, she was amazed. She rubbed her eyes a few times just to make sure she wasn't hallucinating. It was Pio. He was standing on his 2 feet, and his arm had been reached. She knew he had impressive regenerative abilities, but this was something out of this world. Inhuman almost. As Peter stood there, she noticed he had his hand over his belly. His regenerative powers were impressive, but he had used too much energy, and for the first time, he felt hungry. He started having second thoughts that if he was to get this severely injured once more, then maybe he wouldn't be able to regenerate anymore. The beast turned and looked at Peter, tilting its body slightly to the side. It seemed confused. Its interest had been piqued, and once again he started to walk towards Peter. Although Peter had regenerated, he hadn't suddenly gotten stronger. If he was to face the creature again, it would just be the same outcome. As Peter saw it heading towards him, he was trying to decide what to do. Should I go for its legs? But it's too fast. Maybe I should run and attack. Just because its attack speed is fast doesn't mean its legs are fast. However, as Peter had finished that thought, the roots in its legs contracted, then pushed off the ground, propelling it forward like some type of spring. It was now directly in Peter's face in a matter of seconds. It swung its arm out and Peter could see the blade. With his reaction speed, he was able to react to the attack, but he could tell that he was just a little too late and the blade this time would chop his head off. If only I was a little bit faster. Peter shouted. A fraction of a second was all he needed. He continued to duck down with all his might, and as he did, the sound of an object swinging fast through the air was heard. My head. It's all right. It's still on me. Peter thought. When looking at the beast's body, spirit spees could be seen plunging deep inside of it. CIA, who had been watching from the side, was deeply confused. She looked closely at the spees that were inside the beast. They looked identical to her own. The only problem was she wasn't the one who had thrown them. Those spirit spees hadn't come from her, which meant it could have only come from one person. She had seen the same thing happen before. They say, heroes always arrive at the last second, Vorden said with a smile as he appeared out from one of the buildings with Layla standing by his side. Your family member, Peter, race, white, is getting hungry. Seeing this message had brought back bad memories for Quinn. No longer did Quinn need to be fed. The only situation where he did was if he had been too injured, needing a new energy source to power his regenerative abilities. Quinn no longer got the EXP shared message and he started to fear the worst. Him and Fex had been walking around in a circle-like area and had covered almost half of the distance while walking around. It seemed like luck wasn't on his side and he had chosen the wrong direction. Hey man, aren't we just walking in circles? Fex complained. The thing I see, I think it keeps moving, Quinn yelled back, lying about the situation. They were too far in, around one direction. If they were to turn around and head back, it would only take longer. But with worry inside him for what was happening, he started to pick up the pace. Asterisk. After the first attack on Peter, the beast stood there slightly confused, not following up with a second attack. Using this opportunity, he quickly picked and shifted over and backed away from the creature. It didn't seem interested in following him, but this time, with the spees that were stuck inside it. While doing this, he chose to head in the opposite direction of Vorden and Layla. They were both using long-range skills, and it wouldn't be good if the beast got close to them. When coming from the side of one of the buildings, the two of them had quickly assessed the situation. Seeing a humanoid creature, they knew the others were in danger, and when they saw Peter trying to confront the thing, they didn't have much time to think and needed to act straight away. Layla, go check up on Logan and see if there's anything you can do to help, Vorden said. It looks like Logan is preparing something, and right now, he's the strongest one here. Vorden still had not gotten the chance to gather much abilities. If he were to gauge himself, he was at one of his weakest moments right now. CIA support ability was at level 4 and Layla's telekinesis ability was at level 2. Using Rayton, he could power that up to level 6. Unfortunately, there was no way for him to get Peter's ability due to his cells being different. He could go up to Logan and it would be a huge power boost. He wouldn't know how to use their ability, but at least he could combine his amount of MC cells into one. The problem with that was that it required Syl to help. Without Quinn here, Syl seemed disinterested in the whole event. The only other time he would come out was the situation of the body being in danger. Looking at the creature in front of him, they would die before even finding out they were in danger. Not only that, but Peter needed Vorden's help. Based on the last attack, he had only come out alive by the skin of his teeth. Vorden, we need to fight together, no, Layla replied. This time, I'm not trying to be rude, but your attacks would do nothing and would only get in the way. I'm afraid I'm only a little better than you in this situation. We need Logan, Vorden replied. Gritting her teeth at hearing that she was weak once again, she ran off to the direction Logan was in. Do you need any help? She asked. Our energy weapon creation at 50%. I'm sorry, but there isn't much you or I can do. We just have to wait a little longer, Logan replied. Again, Layla had heard those words. There was nothing she could do, and it was true. While there were 2 spirit spears inside it, the beast tried to swing its hand mid-air. It realized that for some reason its attack wasn't as fast as it usually would be. It continued to swing its arm downward. Then, the spirit blade's time had run out. As it swung its hand down, it felt and looked faster than all of the overattacks. Now that its speed had returned to normal, it looked up at Peter, ready to finish him off once again. It prepared its legs ready to spring into action once again. But just before it was about to set off, Vorden threw another one of the spirit spears, landing right in the back of the beast's legs. Another spear came out again. This time, the beast got out from his leading downward position and moved to avoid the spear. It looks like he's figured it out, Vorden said. This is the problem with high-level beasts. Now the beast was looking in Vorden's direction. No, if they get rid of him, then I will have no support, said Peter. I have to fight. Readying himself, he rushed forward. The beast continued to ignore Peter, though, and it seemed like he was going to deal with the biggest annoyance first, which was Vorden. As his back was turned, something strange happened, though. As it looked down, another spirit spear was stuck in its body. It was sure it was keeping an eye on the other boy. So where did the spear come from? Pretty boy, you owe me a date after this one. CIA shouted. She had come out from the side of the house and was now standing in the street. She wasn't confident that the attack will be able to land at the distance she was at, so she decided to come closer. Although she was scared, her mind was screwed on straight. If they wanted to live, they would all need to do their part. Before the beast could choose its target, Peter was already upon him and had thrown a fist against his solid body. The beast was shifted from his position a few inches back. Did it not hurt him? How are we meant to kill this thing? Peter said. As the beast went for the attack, 2 spirit spears were thrown from both sides. The beast moved instinctively, avoiding the spears now. Although none of the spears hit, it would stop the beast from being able to land an attack on Peter. The 2 continued to do this, while the whole situation was going on, even with the beast's large body. The beast was able to avoid all of the spears thrown by the 2. It was starting to grow tired, though, and without the others realizing it, it was inching its way towards one of them, storing the power in its legs until it got close enough. It managed to avoid more of the spears. Then, quickly contracting the roots of one of its legs, it sprung forward to the side. It didn't go for Vorden or Peter. It went for CIA. Damn, why didn't I think of this? Vorden said and slapped a hand over his face, annoyed at himself. It was a simple rule when fighting. In a situation like this, it would clearly get rid of the weakest and most annoying one first. Their distractions had only worked well so far, thanks to both of them throwing the spears. Now, with it coming straight towards her, the spear she had been throwing finally managed to hit. However, it was useless. 1 or 2 spears weren't going to do much in helping her fight against such a thing. She didn't have the crazy amount of experience Vorden did, and the reaction and speed Peter had. If I'm going to die, I'm going to curse, and look at what kills me right in the face. CIA shouted. As its bladed claw was about to reach out and stab her in the face, they were stopped mid-air in its tracks inches away from her face. They say heroes arrive at the last second, Fex said, with his hands twitching, holding the strings using all of his strength. Lame. Vorden muttered. Doesn't he know I already said that? At first, she thought that Fex had saved her, but on closer inspection, when looking at the blade, a strange purple shadow substance could be seen around it. The blade had been stopped. If it had continued to move forward, it would have pierced her skull, almost showing no resistance. CIA once again could live to see what would happen in the next few moments, still unsure if she would live past today. However, what she was surprised about was who exactly had come to save her. Out of the corner of her eye, she could see a black-haired boy, pulling and twitching off to the side. What was his name again? Fex. CIA thought. Wasn't he a level 1? But she didn't stay long to find out. While the beast was stuck in place, she quickly ran off to where Layla and Logan were standing down the street a little away. As the beast saw its bladed arm being wrapped around by the strange shadow substance, while also being pulled by the strings, it was wondering just which one was affecting it more. For some reason, Even though it was using all its strength, it was unable to move its arm forward to kill its target. It was something it had never experienced before. A whisper was suddenly heard in Peter's ear. "Go join the others," Quinn said. "You fought enough, and if you get hurt again, who knows if you will survive." Peter looked to his side and could see Quinn standing there. He had already equipped all of his beast gear equipment on before coming over ready for a battle. Still, even he and Fex were unprepared for what they were facing. When looking at him, there was no joy on his face. It was dead serious, and Quinn was fully concentrating. "If you are in trouble, I won't hesitate to sacrifice myself," Peter said as he walked off to where the others were. Before leaving, Peter turned once again. "Quinn, it's strong." Looking at the beast, still curious about its movements, Quinn replied, "I know. A new quest received. Defeat the king of the underground city. Our king tier beast, Lickmorn. The town has been left behind, and in its empty place, the beasts began to take over. Amongst the many, eventually, a single creature took over, calming the seat and title of king. The others do his bidding as he protects the treasure located in the tower." Quest reward? Peter didn't need to say anything, for as soon as Quinn had seen the strange beast, the system had immediately activated a quest for him. It had been a while since the system automatically gave him a task, usually when it would appear when he faced a strong opponent of some sort. This also happened when he was to face Leo. He found it strange that nothing had come up for the advanced tier beast, but it was probably because the system didn't deem it as special enough for the planet they were on. What interested Quinn about this strange quest was, for the first time, it seemed to tell a little bit about how the creature came to be. Is it because of the area we are in? Maybe it is related to the vampires and not the Dalki after all. The information also revealed that it had been acting as a guard for the tower. If such a strong beast was guarding it and it had stayed underground, Quinn couldn't even begin to imagine what it was trying to protect. Lastly, the quest reward for defeating the beast. Even when going against Leo, there was a clear quest reward and instant level up. For some reason, though, this one was hidden. He didn't know why, but the fact that it was hidden only made him want to find out what it was more. The real problem was, though, could they beat it? A king tier beast. He started to think back about all the students going up against the advanced tier beasts, and even with 50 of them, they were unable to kill such a thing. The ones that were left able to fight on were Fex, Vorden, himself, and Logan. But it seemed like Logan was still busy with something else. CIA was out of it, and would no longer be any use. The difference between this fight and the one earlier was Fex and Quinn would be willing to display their full powers. CIA could always be hypnotized for later, and even if she couldn't, the lives of all of them were more important than one. The beast was no longer curious about the strange shadow and strings, and pulled its arm back out of the shadow. Seeing this, Quinn quickly returned it to himself. There was one great advantage to them being underground. Quinn's shadow powers were stronger, even with the artificial light source from Logan. Just being in a darker environment increased the distance of his shadows. It was only because of this he was able to use it a distance away from himself. As the beast moved its hand, Fex for the first time could feel its enormous strength. "What? He wasn't this strong before, was he?" Fex said, as his hand started to ache holding onto the strings. Does this mean Quinn's shadow was doing most of the work? He could hold on no longer on, and it was just the waist. It seemed like the beast was moving just fine with or without his strings. "I need to help them," Vorden said. Vorden was now standing by the other side. The 5 of them had gone to hide behind a building, out of the street and out of the way of what was about to go down. 70% of energy weapon has been created. Whatever Logan was doing, it looked like it still wasn't ready yet, and he couldn't join the fight just yet. "Logan, do you mind if I touch you?" Vorden asked. "Even if you do copy my ability. It's not like others," Logan explained. "You won't be able to get a clear grasp, and the ability itself is pretty useless, honestly. It was only because I was able to implement it with my brains I was able to come up with a use. Not saying you don't have brains, of course, but you understand." "Logan, stop rambling and trust me." Noticing that Vorden was trustworthy and had come with ideas so far, Logan decided to put a bit of faith in him. Part of the suit that was covering the arm shifted upward as the suit broke down into the hundreds of little spiders, and the two had touched hands. With that, Vorden started to move. He didn't go onto the street like the others thought he would. Instead, he went through the buildings down the side looking for the perfect spot. His aim was never to use Logan's ability, but only wanted the MC cells that came with it. He had already used a large amount, throwing out spears constantly. Still, with Logan's level 8 ability, he had to have a large amount. Not only that, but if he could get Rayton or Syl to fight, they would be able to combine the other abilities, making a spirit spear above a level 8 ability. The level 4s didn't do much, but surely this would have an effect. The only problem was, the beast was now cautious against the spears, so Vorden wanted to get in the perfect location, waiting for the right time. Sometimes, when the ability level was higher, it would also consume more MC points with each use of the ability. There was no time for testing, and no second chances against a foe like this. This is crazy. CIA shouted. Why are the 2 level 1s, the weakest in our team, out there fighting? Are they idiots? Are they trying to get themselves killed? She yelled. Suddenly, a hand had come towards her face, and the right side of her cheek was stinging. When she looked at who had just slapped her, she could see Layla was the one who had done it. It's because of those idiots that you're even alive. Layla shouted. Layla, what do you mean? CIA asked, holding her face. As CIA looked closely, she could see a dark purple shadow emitting from Quinn's back. Those 2 level 1s are the strongest level 1s you will ever see. The beast seemed to be cautious about the 2 opponents in front of it. It didn't know why, but it felt like they were different to the ones before it. The presence-emitting form, these 2 were similar to the boy it had thought before. Still, it wasn't entirely the same. Although it wasn't showing on his face, Fex was worried. There were 2 main reasons for this. They were going up against a king-tier beast. Fex struggled to fight an advanced-tier beast on his own. He wasn't yet at the point he could deal with a king-tier. If only I had a puppet, maybe we would have better chances, he thought. This was the second problem. His ability, his family training, mostly focused on using a puppet as a fighting tool. Of course, they trained their own bodies and strengths, but only the full potential and fighting power of the Sujian's family would come out when they were also using a puppet. He had finally found the perfect person, Erin, but now that she had gone, there was no one else that interested him, or he felt like would be the right fit. As they stood there, Fex moved his finger slightly as he threw out a needle with a string attached. It was so thin it couldn't be seen by the human eye. Once the string was attached to the beast's leg, he would pull with his strength, and the 2 of them would go in for the attack. However, before the string had even reached the beast, it threw its bladed hand down, cutting the invisible piece of string. Fex gulped at this sight. That's not normal. That string is nearly as hard as steel. It shouldn't be that easy to break. My strings are basically useless against this guy. With no puppet and his sharp blades, I can't do anything. So I can only rely on my vampire abilities. Fex knew that none of his mind control and charm-like abilities would work on such a powerful creature, which meant they would have to deal with it the old-fashioned way. He looked at Quinn, who stood to his right, with his shadow shifting, protecting him. It seemed like Quinn didn't quite know what to do either. "Ugh!" Fex shouted as he charged in. "Quinn, I'll attack and you cover me with the shadow." Although Quinn didn't agree with the plan, it was already too late as Fex was charging in. In Fex's mind, he was the faster, more skillful fighter of the 2. All he needed was Quinn to use the shadow to block the attacks he couldn't see, and he was hoping that would be enough. While charging forward, Fex threw out blood swipes. Seeing this, the beast, they swung its own hand blades at such an incredible speed, it looked like it had managed to create its own wind strike pressure that clashed with the blood swipes. Quinn followed closely behind, and it was a good thing he did, as the beast continued to swing its arms about, causing a flurry of swipes. From behind Fex, a few more blood swipes had followed. He didn't need to ask where they had come from. "It looks like you're better back up than I thought," Fex said. Using the shadow, Quinn blocked some of the attacks, while also using the blood swipe of his own. The 2 of them continued to attack while pushing forward. It took the 2 of them using their blood swipes, including Quinn using his shadow, to match the speed of attacks coming from the King tier beats, and currently they were at a stalemate. Watching from the side, CIA's mouth was left wide open. "What? Who are these guys?" their abilities, they looked the same, and how are they able to go toe-to-toe with a king-tier beast? Layla didn't say anything back, as it was pointless, as her memory would soon be wiped off the whole thing anyway. Although they were able to match the power and speed of the king-tier's attacks, they couldn't keep this up forever. In a way, using the blood-type attacks drained their life force, and they would eventually run out of energy. When looking at the beast, the same couldn't be said for it. Not only that, but Quinn's MC points were deteriorating fast. He tried using the shadow to block as little as possible. With every block, the shadow would get damage, causing him to use up his MC. The attacks were just too powerful. Knowing this, the two of them pushed forward. Quinn charged in. Fex shouted, "Blood shield!" A wide barrier of blood was lifted from the ground, blocking the incoming attacks. Quinn didn't hesitate and went off to the side. Wind Walk activated. Using his extra speed from his intermediate boots, he tried charging in from the side. A blood crescent kick. It was too risky trying to get in close. It was likely it would notice Quinn by then. Even with the attacks coming towards it, it did nothing to block them. The two attacks had landed on the beast, yet not a mark was left on it. That was one of my most powerful attacks. There was only one thing left for Quinn to try. One of the beast's arms extended outward, aiming straight for him. Flash step. The blow was avoided, and the blood hammer was in preparation. A normal hammer strike was likely to do nothing against a beast like this. If he wanted to hurt it, he needed his most powerful strike. In the middle of his preparation for the strike, the tree root extended arm had turned around and extended, following Quinn's position. After only a few motions of the blood hammer, he needed to cancel it and avoid the blow. His shadow would move to slow, so he only had one option. Flash STE. Quinn tried to execute the flash step, but for the first time, he was too slow. Tilting his head to the side and kicking his feet to the ground, he managed to block the attack using his shoulder. The blade pierced through him easily, and now he was attached to the beast via its extended root arm. 60/80th HP. Although Fex wanted to help Quinn, he knew it would be a waste, and there was the opportunity to strike. Fex, using his great speed, had managed to get within striking distance of the beast. An uppercut fist that was encased in blood was aiming towards the beast's belly. It was an attack Quinn had never seen before. It was also the strongest attack that Fex had when combining his martial arts with his vampire skills. "You damn tree fool!" he shouted as he plunged his fist right into the center of its belly. Vibrations and pressure of wind came out from the attack, and the beast had been moved a foot back as it slightly hurled and arched its back forward. "Yes, they got an attack in." Layla cheered. "No," Logan said. "It's too early to celebrate." The beast stood upright and lifted its arm that was attached to Quinn. The two were lifted up high, a few meters up in the air, before it used a strong force, slamming him down into one of the buildings off to the side. The building crumbled down on top of Quinn's body as he was thrown down. "Quinn!" Fex shouted. It was clear the attack was a powerful one, and even he wasn't sure if he would have made out alive. Still, there wasn't much chance for him to worry. The beast retracted its arm from the fallen building, and now was focused on Fex. The attacks coming towards him were at close range, and it took every bit of energy and skill for Fex to dodge all the blows. With each strike, he managed to avoid most of the attacks. Still, the edge of the beast's bladed arm would scratch Fex. These weren't shallow cuts either. Some of them were quite deep. "Is fast, but just not fast enough," Layla said. From the crumbled building off to the side, one of the larger slabs of walls were pushed to the side. The dust started to settle, and Quinn could be seen underneath it, covered in wounds and blood. Most of his bones had been broken, and it was painful to even lift his body up. 12/80th HP. Blood Bank activate. He had no choice and needed to use the blood bank to heal most of the serious wounds. As his body started to recover, he watched Fex amazingly dodge the beast's fast attacks. Using his imagination, Quinn pictured himself in Fex's situation, and he would have been dead by now with his own speed. The fight continued on, and a pool of blood could be seen underneath his 2 feet. The wounds were taking a toll on him as he started to slow down. In the middle of the fight, Fex was starting to lose hope. Even if he was faster, more skillful, it meant nothing. His strongest attack was unable to hurt the beast. For a king-tier beast to do anything, They would need at least an advanced tier weapon, and even then it would unluckily be able to do much damage. Am I really going to die because of this ugly monster? Fex thought. Quinn felt the same way. His intermediate tier gauntlets just wasn't going to be enough to hurt the king tier's body. Fex continued to dodge, and as he was in the middle of his thoughts, a strange green beam of light could be seen from his side. Duck! Instinctively, Fex reacted to the words and ducked his body down. The green beam of light carried on moving forward and went straight through the beast's body. Our energy weapon has been completed. Looks like it was a success, Logan said. As for the first time during the fight, black blood was trickling down from the wound. For the first time since the fight had started, the king tier beast had finally bled. Just when Fex felt like all was lost, a strange green energy of light came out and plunged into the beast's upper body. Although Fex was unaware of what had happened, Quinn, who had emerged from the rubble, managed to catch everything with his own two eyes. Quinn was still injured. His wounds were worse than usual, and even with the use of the blood bank, his body this time would take a while to heal. He had used the blood bank completely, and it was now empty. It had brought him up to 62/80ths of his HP. Healing this much would allow him to continue in the fight. He still also had the flask that was given to him by Fex. But looking at how badly injured Fex was, he hesitated about using it. He was debating whether the blood in the flask should be used on Fex instead. It was his own after all, and he didn't have a blood bank. That was clear after looking at how damaged his body was during the fight. As Fex's legs were wobbling and his speed was slowing down, from the side came in a short man who was in a silver and green suit. Logan, Quinn thought. But this suit looked different from the others he had seen. On top of his arms were beams of energy shaped like sharp daggers. They looked similar to an ancient weapon known as a kata. Engage, maximum system output, Logan said as he thrust his fist forward. The kata-like weapon suddenly grew longer. The green energy had extended and went right through the beast's solid body. Fex, I'm going to need your help, Logan said as he pulled out the energy blade from the beast. Logan knew this wasn't going to be enough. Suddenly, the beast's attention was on Logan, the person who had injured him. All Fex wanted to do right now was rest, but just from looking at Logan he knew they couldn't rely on him. The beast went in for an attack from above, and Logan went to block with the energy blade. But when Fex looked at both of them, it looked like watching a tortoise and hare race against each other. They now had the power and the weapon to injure the beast, but not the speed. Logan was too slow. Seeing this, using his last bit of energy, Fex pivoted and shifted himself using all his strength to dash forward. With his shoulder in front, he barged Logan out of the way, allowing him to avoid the strike. The blade continued to go down, and although it didn't hit its original target, it still managed to hit Fex between his neck and shoulder. Kill the damn thing. Fex screamed as more blood was dripping down his arm. Energy blade, maximum output, Logan shouted, and at the same time, one of the energy blades seemed to respond. It grew twice in size, and Logan slashed down with all his strength. It went through the beast's side, and the sound of something falling to the ground was heard. The green jade-like arm had been detached from its body, and black blood was now pouring out from the wound. What is that? CIA asked, amazed at what was happening. I've never seen a weapon like that before. If he had stuff like that was so effective, why doesn't everyone use it? On the other hand, Layla, who was standing next to her, didn't have the same look of amazement on her face. Her forehead was wrinkled as she was in deep concern. The green blade that had just been used had fizzled out, and now Logan only carried one on his arm. I thought this was the case, Layla said. I've seen one of these before. Or to be more precise, I learned about this before. It's another way to use the beast crystal that was discontinued by the military. Discontinued? But why? CIA asked. As you can see, by using crystals as a raw form of energy, one is able to create something called an energy blade. The problem is, all of its energy is coming from the crystal, and it needs a constant output to support it. Using the raw energy rather than mixing it with other materials creates a more powerful weapon. But this means two things. First, the weapon isn't permanent. Once all the energy from the crystal has been used, the weapon will disappear. This also means that the weapon strength will vary depending on how much energy is used when attacking. Because of these reasons, The military decided that it was much more practical to use the crystal core to create beast weapons rather than energy weapons. Energy weapons were fine for the low-end use when using a basic tier or intermediate crystal, but anything above would be a waste. For someone like Logan, intermediate crystals weren't too hard for him to come by. He could always just purchase them online on the marketplace. The problem was anything above that. Past the advanced tier crystal, there weren't many people who sold them. This was even true for the advanced tier crystals. Instead, people would post requests, asking others to obtain a specific type of crystal for them. The problem was, Fex had not anticipated needing more than 2 intermediate crystals on a trip like this. It wasn't exactly something people freely carried around with them either. It looks like the attack was a success, Logan said. With the black blood continuing to drop from the beast's wound, it decided to retreat for the first time, leaping back. Fex wanted to chase after the thing, but when he took a step forward, his wounds seemed to have gotten the better of him, as he went down to one knee, just stopping himself from collapsing on the floor. "I'm more hurt than I thought." There was no point for Logan to give chase either. The energy blade was just that, a blade of energy. Unlike traditional beast gear, it didn't give any extra stats to the user, and the suit he was wearing didn't either. If he was to chase the beast, he wouldn't catch up to the thing in a million years. Suddenly, the beast's wound started to bleed less. It looked like some vine-like structures were starting to cover over the wound. Next, from the wound a little stump was starting to grow. Am I imagining things, or is that thing starting to get smaller? Layla asked, still looking from the side of the street. "You're right," Peter replied, still having his hand hover over his belly. At the same time, he was looking at CIA in a slightly different way. "I never got an order not to hurt her today, right?" Peter thought. The group wasn't imagining things. As the stump started to grow, it looked like it was forming another hand. At the same time, the beast was getting smaller in size, as if he was taking his mass from one area and placing it in another. When it was all done, the beast once again had 2 bladed limbs that shined like jade. Only now, it was roughly the same height as a regular human. "Looks like we're going to have to go for round 2. Fex groaned out as he lifted himself off the ground. He knew that without his help, Logan wouldn't be able to do much. He was their attacker, their damage dealer, and he needed to protect him if they wanted to kill the beast. "Why don't you lie back down?" a voice said from his side, as he felt a hand also touch down on his shoulder. "Quinn, but how?" Fex asked. Vampires had supernatural healing abilities, but for serious life-threatening wounds, the use of blood would be needed. If the wound was bad, but not life-threatening, they would eventually heal up but get hungry in the process. But what was strange about Quinn was how quick he had healed. Did he use the flask? Quinn's body had healed. He wasn't quite at full health, but he was able to fight once again. "We can talk about that later," Quinn replied while handing the flask back to Fex. "Take it, heal up." My guess was wrong." Fex thought. It was tempting for Fex, but in the end, he refused again. "No, Quinn, not to be rude, but you're too slow to go against something like this, and there might actually be a use in another way for us to get out of this mess if I don't use it. You keep it." What Fex had said was correct. Quinn knew that with his speed, he would be hit left and right from the beast. His shadow was strong but not quick enough to catch up. "Don't worry about that." Quinn said. She walked forward. "Are you sure you would like to add all 6 points to agility?" Points added. 26 plus 4, agility. Before trying to hand over the flask to Fex, Quinn had taken a tiny drop of blood, giving him 1 more point in agility. Then, using the remaining points from leveling up, he decided to put everything in one area. Finally, there were also the intermediate boots he was wearing, bringing his total agility up to 30, and also burning him up to a new level of speed. The speed was at the same level as a vampire Nobel. When Quinn said these words, Fex could feel his confidence. He wanted to say he was crazy for trying to take on such a monster when he could barely dodge its attacks. But for some reason, with his tone of voice and the air around him, it felt like something in Quinn had changed compared to him a few moments ago. "Who are you really? Is this the difference between the Punishers and the rest of us?" So far, Fex had multiple guesses about who Quinn really was, but all of them seemed to be missing the mark. Everything just didn't go together yet. Still, just in case, Fex went off to the side and leaned up against the building wall. Ham, who had been flying and hovering in the air for most of the time, came swooping down. Ham, if I don't come back from this, I want you to go back to the others. Don't stay here. Fex ordered. What do you mean? Ham replied. I know the wounds are bad, but you should eventually heal from this, right? As Ham said those words, he started to look at the wounds. Although they would take a while to fully heal, it was obvious if the healing process had started or not, as the bleeding should have already stopped. But from the multiple cuts that were mainly on his upper body and arms, blood was still seeping out. Master, are you doing this on purpose? Fex didn't reply, but it was clear that this was his answer. Ham wanted to complain. He had been with Fex since he could remember, but he had to do whatever Fex told him to. And what about the other vampire? If I return, do you want me to inform them about him? Ham asked. While at the school, Fex's state of mind had changed a lot. At first, he wanted to get close to Quinn as a scapegoat if his family ever came to get him. He still had that in his plans. But during their short time together, they had done many things together, and Fex had honestly never had a more interesting and fun time with someone. Leave it. What Quinn does is none of our business, Fex replied. Both Logan and Quinn now stood a few meters apart from the smaller version of the king-tiered beast that they had gone up against. Logan, I want you to stay behind me. When I give the call, I want you to attack with all that you have, Quinn said. For the first time, Quinn seemed to be taking the leadership role, something that Logan had done previously. Still, Logan wasn't complaining. He didn't know what Quinn had up his sleeve, but he had known him long enough to trust him. Quinn's shadow before was continuously shifting around his body. Usually, he did these series of actions as a form of protection for himself. Of course, he only did something like this when there was a fight. This time he had the shadow in a ball-like shape hovering above his shoulder. Against the king-tiered beast, it was useless to use as a defensive measure. Its attacks were too fast for him to move the shadow in the right position. If it couldn't be used for defense, then it was better off being used as an attack. The beast had waited long enough, instead of charging in as it would usually do. It decided to swing out its bladed arm and stretch it out from the side. Right now, Quinn was standing directly in front of Logan. With this attack, it was clear that its target was Logan standing behind Quinn. Even if he did trust Quinn, just to make sure, Logan raised up the energy blade, knowing his suit wouldn't be able to handle an attack. You're not the only one that can do something like that. Throwing out a blood swipe and then grabbing it quickly with his shadow, Quinn had made his shadow scythe. He swung it down from above, hoping to hammer it down before it reached Logan. Knowing the strength of the previous blood swipe, the beast chose to ignore it and continued on with its attack. The blood swipe from before would have shattered and not even affected the path of its attack, only slightly slowing it down. Asterisk bang. Like a hammer coming down on a nail, the scythe managed to knock the tree root arm, pinning it into the ground. That attack wasn't that strong last time. Fex said, seeing this. It hadn't been too long since they fought. In that amount of time, Quinn had leveled up a few times as well as gained a few samples of blood from others. I just. CIA was at a loss for words. She had experienced too many surprises with this group so far. They were all monsters. Can you do something like that? CIA asked Layla. So far, she seemed to be the only normal one of the group. But she remembered that she had thought the same with Quinn, thinking he was normal, and after being proven wrong, she felt like it could happen again. As I said, they saved your life earlier. These guys are amazing. As she said those words, she too wished she would be able to take part in the fight, rather than just stand by the side. Seeing that the beast was targeting Logan and not himself, Quinn knew he needed to do something. Wind Walk activated. Activating his boots and dashing forward, he traveled at a speed that had never been achieved by him before. In an instant, he had nearly covered the entire distance and was now directly in front of the beast. Punching the beast as hard as it could in the stomach, Quinn was hoping to make some sort of impact, but it didn't even budge. As its other hand retracted back, it started swinging away, attacking him in the same way as it did with Fex. Only the result this time was different. Every strike was avoided. When Fex faced the beast, he was able to avoid the critical blows, but he would still suffer some hits here and there. With Quinn, it was different. He was able to avoid each of the strikes cleanly, not getting a scratch on him. This speed. Did he really hide his strength? Just how? Fex was now even more confused than before. Everything that was happening right now didn't make sense. Why fake being hurt? Why risk being attacked by such a strong beast, and how when only moments ago, Quinn was unable to avoid the strike. But at this moment, he was able to perfectly evade every strike. His speed even surpassed Fex's at this moment. When improving Quinn's stats, each time it went up by 10. There was a significant improvement, and even he could feel this. From 18 to 19 in a stat point, although there was a difference, it was barely noticeable. But going from 19 to 20, the change could be felt and was tremendous. Being able to just dodge the attacks wasn't going to be enough. Whenever an opening appeared, Quinn tried his best to throw out a punch, but the beast's reflexes were just as fast as its attacks, being able to easily block Quinn's attacks or even move out of the way. Bloodhammer was still the strongest skill in Quinn's arsenal, but it took quite a long time to perform. However, the hammer strike, with his increased speed, could be performed fast enough. He just needed to know how to land the attack. While dodging the attacks, Quinn thought hard. The other problem was his stamina wouldn't be able to keep up. Then, an idea hit him while looking at the beast's movements. Right now, he was facing a humanoid-type beast. Not only that, but it was one that had some level of intelligence as well. With this in mind, Quinn threw out a punch from above. Using his speed, he threw out one after another. The first attack was blocked, and when the beast saw the second one, it twisted its body slightly to avoid the blow. Then, something strange had happened. It had blocked one punch and dodged the other, yet a third hand had come out and hit the beast right on the temple of its rounded head. From the outside, the others were just as confused as the beast, because to them, it looked like the beast had moved into Quinn's attack. "Looks like the phantom punch is a success," said Quinn with a smile. Deeply confused by what just happened, the others thought it must have been a mistake on the beast's part. Perhaps Logan's attack had hurt it more than they thought, and now its movements weren't as swift as before. The only one that knew what had happened was Quinn himself. He used the phantom punch. This was an attack that would only work on humanoid creatures with a certain level of intelligence. Quinn wasn't so sure if it would really work, but it was obvious that it worked and was incredibly useful in the battle. Those with high intelligence wouldn't be tricked by the phantom punch. At the same time, beasts whose intelligence were far too low wouldn't even recognize the trick in the first place. This was a reason why the phantom punch wouldn't work on most beasts. However, it seemed like the beast in front of him was perfect for the phantom punch. The level of intelligence was enough for it to be tricked, but not high enough to recognize that it was being tricked. The standoff between the two continued, with Quinn avoiding most of the blows cleanly, and whenever an opening revealed itself, Quinn would throw multiple punches mixing in a phantom punch in between. Once again, another blow landed, this time on the beast's neck just above its chest. Again, is the beast starting to slow down? CIA thought. But watching closely, Fex could see that the beast hadn't slowed down at all. Its movements were still as fast as ever. So what was happening? It was simply incomprehensible. Eventually, the tide was starting to turn. As Quinn continued on with the fight, he started to be the aggressor more often, hiding his phantom punches in between the ordinary jabs. The outsiders felt as if the beast was the one on the defensive and that it was delivering itself onto the path of Quinn's attacks. It would constantly dodge and lean onto Quinn's fists. Then, instead of dodging, the beast decided to block the upcoming attack. Lifting its arm, it covered its rounded head, but with its movements, Quinn took the opportunity to send a blow to its stomach. At this point, Fex finally understood what was happening. It's got to be the phantom punch. I can't think of anything else. He's mixing it with the ordinary jabs and hooks. But who taught him the phantom punch, and when? He was just in the school with me. Or could it be that the other vampire is teaching him in the school again? Even with all these points, and even if Quinn did have a teacher that was in the school, it didn't explain the crazy amount of time it had taken him to learn such a skill. Now, Fex was starting to feel frightened. Before it was amazing, but every time he saw Quinn get stronger, a strange feeling overcame him. Before he was sure he was always stronger than him. Now, though, he couldn't say for sure. It was as if he was looking at two different people. The punches continued to descend like a waterfall, and now it looked like the beast was getting bullied. The monster that they were all afraid of just a few moments ago was getting punched left and right by Quinn. "I was wrong," CIA said. "I can't believe I thought he was useless. I'm sorry, Layla. I now understand why you got mad." As Layla watched Quinn, even she hadn't expected something like this from him. Although, the tides had turned in the fight, with Quinn being able to attack the beast several times. It was having no effect on it whatsoever. The blows didn't leave any wounds or marks, and it had barely moved from its original position due to Quinn's attacks. It has to be doing something, Quinn thought. Otherwise, why would the beast attempt to block the attacks? Still, he wasn't doing enough damage, and if he continued on like this, his stamina would run out before the beast. Looks like I have to use the hammer strike after all, Quinn thought. There was still a problem, though. The hammer strike may be quicker than the blood hammer, but it was still far too slow for the beast. Another phantom punch was delivered to the stomach. As the beast went to block the attack, a flash step was performed, and Quinn was now standing directly behind the beast. The movements of the hammer strike had started, and the beast attempted to turn around. As it did all of this, its movements slowed down, and its feet got stuck in the place where it was standing. It hadn't noticed that during the fight, Quinn had moved his shadow down to the beast's feet. Holding it in place, the plan was never to keep the beast there. He knew it wouldn't hold it back long enough, but it was enough time for him to perform the hammer strike. Placing his foot down and pulling one arm back, he snapped the other one out, hitting the beast right in the center. For the first time, it had been lifted into the air, and when it landed, the beast stumbled, struggling to stand on its 2 feet. "Logan, get ready!" Quinn shouted. "Maximum output!" Logan shouted, and his final kata-like weapon doubled in size. The beast was now recovering. It was starting to lift itself off the floor. The attack was effective, but not good enough. Afraid that it might move and avoid the decisive blow, Quinn reacted fast. Shadow Void. A bubble-like space was created in an instant. It was the same as the Shadow Void from before, but this one was a lot smaller. It also didn't encase Quinn and Logan, but only went around the beast. This would stop the beast from running away and would buy them a little bit of time that they needed. "Attack now," Quinn ordered. Logan was slightly confused at what was going on. After all, Quinn was displaying several different skills that he had never seen before. After seeing what he was able to do against the beast so far, he decided to listen and swung down at the bubble-like space where he last saw the beast. At just the right time, Quinn prepared himself. He planned on canceling Shadow Void at the right time to allow Logan's attack to land on the beast. Cancel Shadow. While in the middle of canceling the skill, the Shadow Void had broken itself. This was also an expected result. Logan continued to lunge forward with his large energy kata, but he noticed something strange. In the short amount of time it was in the Shadow Void, its appearance had completely changed. The green roots that covered and formed the muscle structure of the beast were now glowing slightly red. When looking at them, it looked as if all of the roots were flowing with energy. They were pulsating, and something could be seen flowing all throughout its body. "Did I wait too long?" Vorden said as he watched from a window up high, in a building nearby. He was still waiting for the perfect opportunity, so he never threw the spirit spay. It was too hard for him to find that opportunity since both Quinn and the beast were just too fast for him to see. But right now, Vorden could tell what had happened to the beast. It was now in rage mode. Something only beasts at a higher tier could do. When they felt a danger, or their life was jeopardized, a beast could go into a rage mode. With this, the maximum amount of energy from the crystal inside them would pump around their body. Beasts rarely went into this mode, due to the fact they could only go into it once. If all the energy from the crystal was used up while in rage mode, they would die and no longer exist. It was a move only used in desperate times. The other problem was if a beast was killed while it was in rage mode, the crystal obtained from it would be useless. Travelers would often try their best to defeat the beast before it ever entered rage mode. It was clear, though, a beast in rage mode was a lot stronger. Even with his help and the new and improved Quinn, Vorden was unsure if they could beat it. The Carter continued to thrust forward. When seeing this, the beast knocked the weapon away, shattering it as its attack collided against the weapon. Lifting its legs out, it extended it like a fast piston, hitting Logan in the stomach. Flung back in the air, Logan was thrown several feet down the street. As he was chucked through the air, several of the spiders that made up the suit seemed to fall onto the ground as well. They had been damaged, beyond what they were capable of withstanding, and could no longer be used. Why? Does the world really want us all dead? Layla said. Fex, seeing this, was sure now. He had made the right decision. He had been suppressing it this whole time, but with the blood loss, his lust had grown to the maximum. Purposely, not healing himself, Fex had done this as a last resort, and it was time to use it. Slowly, his body was starting to change. His muscles were bulging, his skin shrinking, and his hair was falling off from the top of his head. Ham flew away from his master, looking back at what Fex had become. He had a sad look on his face. So, you really did transform. Watching from slightly above everyone else, Vorden had the best view of what was going on down below. The two girls along with Peter were at the opposite end of the street, hid between two buildings. Their heads were tilted around the side. It was quite away from the fight, but still close enough so they could see everything. Vorden himself was in a building but was on the 4th floor, looking out from a window. One of the light balls that Logan had shot out earlier was hanging from the very top of the same building. Carefully, he watched the whole field of what was going on. He needed to see and wait for the right moment to strike. At one point when Logan had attacked the beast, he thought that was the right time. Him and Rayton had switched places, and Rayton was ready to throw the spirit spear. Just before doing so, Rayton informed Vorden of something. With the use of MC cells from both Logan and CIA, Vorden right now had one of the strongest support abilities out there. What they found out was now, with a higher level of the support ability, came more options. CIA's ability limited her to creating only one spear at a time. This limit was still there even with the increase of power. But there were a couple of differences. More MC cells could be put into the spirit spear, creating a more powerful spear. How long or what the effects were, they couldn't tell until the spear was thrown. Once they obtained this information, Vorden felt like it was best to create a stronger spear, one as strong as possible. They might only have one chance at this. The more powerful the attack when using an ability, the more MC cells it would use. As he continued to watch from above, his heart started to sink. A strange feeling came over him, and sweat started to run from his forehead. The beast had just gone into rage mode, but that wasn't the reason Vorden was worried. It was because there was something else down there with them that had brought back bad memories. Fex, who was leant up against one of the buildings, was no longer there, or at least was no longer himself. Instead, the sight of what was known as a bloodsucker was there instead. It looked nearly identical to the time he had faced Quinn back on the Red Portal planet. There were a few differences, but the horrifying creature brought back memories. That day, Syl had saved his life fighting against the bloodsucker, and in his place, Ian was killed. When Quinn was the beast, there was no telling friend from foe. Vorden had kept silent so far, not wanting to reveal his position to the beast, but as he saw the bloodsucker moving towards Quinn, he needed to shout out. "Quinn, behind you!" Vorden shouted. Quinn had his eyes dead set ahead, looking at the beast. He was also concerned about Logan, who had been hit, but when hearing the worry in Vorden's voice, he knew it was urgent. As he turned his head, a bald-headed, muscle-bound creature was seen. The claws on its hands had widened. If it wasn't for the clothes that it was wearing, Quinn would have never known it was Fex. "What is that?" Quinn said. "Is it some type of vampire transformation?" As he looked into Fex's eyes, there was no longer any white in them. It was completely black. No emotion was felt from them. "Is he even still sane?" "Don't you remember?" the system said. "He has turned into a bloodsucker." After hearing the system say those words, Quinn briefly remembered when he hadn't consumed blood for a few days. His own transformation had begun. A message appeared before his mind went to black, saying his transformation into a bloodsucker had been completed. Did he do this willingly? Quinn asked. Perhaps, for a vampire to turn into a bloodsucker, They must have an immense amount of thirst, the system explained. My guess is, when he was wounded from the beast, he suppressed his healing abilities, allowing the blood to continue to drain from his body. When enough blood had poured out, he allowed his body to heal, using the last bit of his energy. Once the healing process was completed and his powers had been used, his thirst was at its maximum. It's a risky thing to do. If you allow too much blood to leave your body, and your wounds aren't able to heal, then it could be life-threatening. I'm surprised this young boy knew how to do such a thing. Vampires aren't often taught this, for a bloodsucker doesn't even see its own kind as a friend, which would suggest he really is an important figure, perhaps the son of one of the vampire heads. Although the explanation was interesting for Quinn, he didn't have much time to think about it. For right now, he was stuck between the two of them. On one side was the Rage King T-Beast, and the other a bloodsucker. Quinn didn't know which one was more troublesome. When Quinn turned into a bloodsucker, all his stats were doubled, but his health was halved and he was unable to use his vampire skills. He looked to his left, he looked to his right, waiting for one of them to make their first movement. At the same time, the bloodsucker and beast dashed forward. "Damn it, Shadow Cloak," Quinn said. From his feet the shadow rised up and suddenly, Quinn had vanished from the sight of the other two. However, it didn't seem like either one of them was interested in him. As Quinn hurried to escape from the area, the two of them clashed in the center of the street. The bloodsucker swiped its claw, while the beast threw out its balled arm. As the two clashed, the power between the two of them was so strong it looked as if ripples were being created in the air. At first, Quinn wanted to go check up on Logan and pull him off to the side to see if he was okay, but when he looked at where Logan was last seen, he was no longer there. Peter had already dragged his body from the street and brought him over to the two girls. Although they didn't have to do much, Logan had already removed the helmet part of his suit. His mouth had blood trickling down from the side, and where he was wounded by the beast's foot. The miniature robotic spiders were working away, patching him up here and there. They could fix the external wounds, but not the internal. It was clear Logan could no longer fight. Instead of going over to where the others were, while the other two were busy fighting, Quinn decided to stay quite close to the fight. He was learning a lot from the fight. When watching originally, their speed was so great Quinn couldn't keep up. To the others, they were nearly unable to see anything, apart from once in a while, where there would be a standoff of power. As the fight continued, Quinn was able to clearly see each attack made by the two of them. Although they looked wild and random, as attacks came rushing out from both of them, it looked like it wasn't the case at all. A lot of Fex's original martial arts moves were still involved, and the beast it too was picking its spots carefully, making it tricky for Fex to get a clean strike in. One thing was clear though, if Quinn was to fight either one of them the way he was now, he would be finished in an instant. Still, he chose to stay close, and learning from the fight wasn't the only reason. From the back of his mind there was one thing he kept thinking about: the quest. The reward of the quest was sure to help him grow and in the future. Not only did Quinn want the experience points for killing the King T-Beast, but he also wanted the quest reward. Most likely, if Quinn wasn't the one to deal the finishing blow, it wouldn't count the quest as completed. While the beast was in its rage mode, there was only one attack that could do any type of damage, and that was the blood hammer. The only question was how? How would he get the last hit? The fight continued on between the bloodsucker and the King T-Beast. At first, when the two of them fought, it looked fairly even between them. Neither one of them was getting significantly hurt from the other. This was good for Fex. When a vampire turned into a bloodsucker, their health, or in Quinn's case HP, was halved. Their wounds would also no longer heal. It was a starved state for vampires, a mode that allowed them to grow stronger in order to consume blood, but also acted as a double-edged sword. However, slowly one of them was starting to get an edge, and it looked like it was the bloodsucker. Quinn was starting to notice that the power and the speed of the King T-Beast was finally starting to slow down. It had been in combat with multiple opponents and multiple times, so it made sense to Quinn, but this wasn't the reason why. The beast had an inhuman amount of stamina and could continue to fight the students for hours on end. The reason why it was starting to slow down and weaken was because of its rage mode. Simply put, the crystal inside was drawing out more power than it could generate, and now the beast was slowly dying. Not understanding what was happening, Quinn felt like this was his chance to attack. Whatever happened, he needed to get that last hit. He had used most of his MC points during the fight, and right now the only skill he could use was the shadow cloak, which he used to hide his presence. Seeing what was happening, Quinn planned to inch closer and closer and try to get behind the king tier beast. While it was distracted fighting, Quinn would prepare the blood hammer and perform a flash step, dashing him forward just before delivering the punch. Trying to implement his strategy, he slowly started to creep towards the fight. On the street, Quinn and the others were stationed on the side of Fex, while the beast was on the other side, which led towards the tower. The fight was still hectic, and the two would span the whole width of the street. The king tier beast threw one of its arms out, and the bloodsucker managed to grab it. Using its increased strength, it yanked the arm as hard as it could, ripping it from the beast's shoulder. Black blood once again started to squirt out from the wound. Quinn had seen this before when Logan had done the same thing. Soon the beast would heal, but this was Quinn's chance. Running forward and around the two, he wanted to get behind the fight. As he took a step to the side, suddenly, a large claw-like fist came out towards him. The fist was briefly stopped by the shadow, and when he looked at where it had come from, it was from the bloodsucker. It could sense where I was even with the shadow cloak on. Quinn thought. Luckily, I thought something might have happened and prepared my shadow just in case. Quickly, Quinn stepped back and went to his position before. It looked like Fex really could no longer tell between friend and foe. Now, there was another problem on Quinn's hands. The attack from the bloodsucker, although it was blocked by the shadow that would be the last one. For now, Quinn's MC points had reached 0. 100 MC. He couldn't complain though. Due to being underground, he was able to use the shadow more often than he usually would have. It seemed like his powers and the amount of MC points taken to use the skills had lessened while down here. Yes, he could no longer use his shadow cloak, but against these two, there was no point using it anyway. They both could sense his presence with or without the shadow cloak. The only thing was, now the others could see him as well. When Quinn had disappeared, they thought he perhaps had left the scene. They never imagined he was still staying so close to the fight. Quinn, what are you doing? Leave it to the two monsters, Vorden said from above. Does your friend have some type of pride or something? CIA said. The only reason I can think of him staying is that he wants to be the one to kill the beast. Layla actually agreed with CIA for once. She didn't know the reason why Quinn had chosen to stay. Was he worried about Fex? Or was it something else? The beast had done the same as last time after its arm had been ripped out. It wanted to take a few steps back and start to recover, but the bloodsucker wasn't going to let it go. When the beast dashed backwards, the bloodsucker gave chase. Before the others would have been too slow. It didn't expect something to be able to match it in speed down here. With a swipe to its chest, the red roots were split open and the black blood squirted out once again. It is to nearly be dead. I need to get that last hit. Obsessed with getting the quest reward for killing the thing, Quinn dashed forward. When he got close to the two of them, the bloodsucker had turned around. The beast behind it looked like it was barely standing. Come on, come at me, Fex. Quinn shouted as he threw out his leg, performing a vertical slice of red aura. Seeing this, the bloodsucker leapt up in the air, and it looked like it would close the distance between the two with one jump. Quinn, Layla said worriedly. Peter was already on the move. He dashed out hoping to take the attack in Quinn's place. However, they were just too far and he would never make it in time. The others expected Quinn to attempt to dodge, but instead, he started to go through the motion of the hammer strike, timing everything perfectly with when the bloodsucker had jumped. Just when it was about to land, Quinn performed a flash step, avoiding the attack and also appearing in front of the king tier beast. Blood hammer. The beast was already weak, and using all the strength he could, he snapped back his arm and with a punch, released the power of the level 2 blood spray, performing a blood hammer. A loud shotgun-like sound was echoed through the underground town. Carefully, Quinn had hit the same spot where the bloodsucker had clawed out the roost, protecting its upper body. Unlike before, the attack seemed to go through. Did he do it? Layla thought. Peter had stopped running, and a smile appeared on his face. He could tell Quinn had done it because he himself felt stronger. A quest completed. Defeat the king tier beast. Ooh. Multiple notification screens appeared at the same time, but Quinn didn't have much time to read all of them. For while celebrating his victory, a strong fist came out from the side, hitting him on the body and sending him flying through the air. Looking down, Quinn could see the bloodsucker's ugly face. That hit, it came from Fex. Was I too greedy this time? Quinn said, "It's not usually like me to be like that." While having these thoughts, he quickly realized something. He wasn't dead. Surely a full-on hit from Fex would have killed him, but the reality was it hadn't done. In fact, Quinn had hardly been hurt at all. 95th HP. Using Quinn's blood bank, he was able to heal most of his wounds but not all, and recovered around 60 of his HP points. That meant the attack had only taken a little over 10 when being hit. Opening his eyes, Quinn could see the bloodsucker in front of him again. He had been chucked into the air and sent back, but it wasn't too far as the blow was significantly weakened, and now he knew why. When looking at Fex, a large, thick blue spirit spear was stuck inside of the bloodsucker. It was hard to even call it a spear, as it seemed to be around the same thickness as an adult human. It looked more like a column that would hold up buildings. "Quinn, I can't produce another one like that. Finish him now if you can," a voice was heard shouting from down the street. Looking behind the bloodsucker, Quinn could see Vorden running towards him. The spear had come from him, waiting for the right moment to throw the spear into the king-tier beast. It looked like it never would happen, and eventually, the beast had already died, but Vorden was glad he had held out. After Quinn's attack, he could see what was going to happen and threw out the large spirit spear into Fex. It was thanks to this that the blow was significantly reduced in terms of power and speed. Still, Vorden knew he needed to continue and act fast. After throwing out the larger spirit spear, he was unable to produce it again. Because of this, Rayton switched places back with Vorden and had run out, hoping to support Quinn. He could only throw the regular spears out now, but it was better than nothing. "Kill Fex," Quinn said. No, he couldn't do that. It was only because of him they were able to kill the king-tier beast in the first place. They could have quite possibly had all died there today. It wasn't fair for them to hurt Thea's savior. "What do you want to do?" a voice said next to Quinn's right. Peter had now joined them as well. Vorden was stood off to the right of the bloodsucker, while Quinn and Peter were stood on the other side of the street. Logan was still hurt and patching himself up by the two girls next to one of the buildings, still staying out of trouble. While watching what was going on, the girl started to hear a few voices from somewhere. "So just a little further ahead and the beast you encountered before should be here," a confident young voice said. "Yes, sir. Every time we wanted to go explore the tower, the beast would come out and stop us. This happened several times while trying to make our way towards the tower, no matter what direction we came from. It seems to be protecting something," a female voice said. "Unfortunately, each time we faced the beast, although we were able to come out with our lives, we were unable to defeat it." "I would agree with your prediction," the confident voice replied. "You were right to not report this to the other shelters, as well as the military shelter. Hopefully, that treasure can do well for our faction." "So, what do you think about that loud bang we heard a few moments ago? Do you think this place was discovered by others?" another male's voice asked. "That's why we're heading there now." The group continued to talk, and Layla and CIA were starting to hear the voices even louder now. Soon they could see just where the conversation was coming from. Down the street, a group of travelers were walking together. It was easy to spot them since each of them had a sticky light patch on them. It worked similar to a torch, only it didn't need to be held and could just be stuck on top of Thea armor. It also glowed the surrounding area rather than just one direction. It allowed the area around the person to be bathed in light. "Don't they look kind of familiar?" CIA thought. The girls didn't come running out. Just because they saw things that looked like humans didn't mean they were. But as they got closer, it turned out they really had seen them before. "Yeah, back at the shelter," Layla replied. They were the group of travelers who had reported to the military, updating them about the exploration. Judging by the conversation they had just overheard, it looked like they hadn't exactly been truthful with Thea's report either. Layla wanted to move from Thea's position. They weren't inside a particular building, but were just between two buildings down an alleyway. She still wasn't sure about these people. If they could lie to the military, perhaps they would also happily silence them for being down here and knowing about this place as well. The problem was Logan. He still looked like he couldn't move. While she was thinking about what to do, it was too late to do anything anyway. Other there, a female voice said, "It looks like there are other people here. Heck, they're kids, aren't they?" The group quickly rushed over to students and were shocked at the state and just how young the students were. After seeing the uniform, they quickly figured out where they were from: the military. Something must have happened, the group thought. They were a group of 5. All of them had beast gear covering their body. The female was the first to approach them, named Lily, who also had a bow on her back. Only Hayes looked a level higher than what Layla had. Then there was a couple of bald-headed twins. Each of them didn't hold a weapon in Thea's hand, but their legs were covered in thick boots, while the rest of Thea's legs had light armor. It was a strange sight. They were called Rock and Puck. There was then another man, who seemed to always be staying by the youngest-looking person's side. He had a shield on his back with a sword sheathed by his waist. The man looked a little older than the others. It was as if he was assigned to look after the whole team, but after listening to them for a while, Layla quickly figured he wasn't the leader. It was the young man standing next to them. The young man had brown wavy hair that was tied up in a ponytail. His weapon of choice was a spear that was as long as himself placed on his back. The most noticeable thing about him was the air around him. It was full of confidence and one with a look of experience. When Layla looked at him, she was reminded of Leo. "I'm the leader, Andre," the young man said. "What happened here? Did you guys get attacked?" "Quinn, move!" Vorden shouted. As Andre asked the question, he had heard voices from down the street. When the group turned to look, they could see the 3 other students all fighting against a strange creature. "Is that the beast you guys encountered before, Andy?" Andre asked. "No, sir. That's something else. I've never seen that before." The older man, Andy, replied. "It doesn't matter. They're in trouble and we need to slay the beast." Then from the shadows, behind where the group had just come from, the sound of loud footsteps was heard. Out from the darkness slowly, a figure started to come out. "Another beast, and it's a strong-looking one. Turn around," CIA said in a panic. But the group or travelers didn't look panicked at all. The strange beast looked a bit like a lion, and was the same size as one. Its muscles could be seen as well, but on its bottom half, instead of a single tail, it carried several, each one with a small flame at the end. The lion approached Andre's side and started to lick him on the face. "A tame beast," Layla said. "That's right," Lily replied. "You guys don't have to worry about a thing. We will get rid of that beast for you. For you see, our leader here is from one of the big 4 families." Seeing the leader of the travelers being able to control and have a beast by his side like that meant that Andre must have been a member of the Bree family. This family wasn't any regular family, for they were one of the big 4. When looking at Andre, though, Layla felt like it wasn't anyone she recognized. Although, those from the big 4 families, other than the leaders, hardly any of the others were recognizable unless they had a bad reputation. The Bree family were a bit unique compared to the other strong families and original families out there. Their ability had always existed, only it wasn't as threatening as the others. Before Earth started the exploration of beast planets, the Bree family were only able to tame one thing: the current animals on Earth. It was only after the exploration had started that their true power came to light. Beasts from other planets were a lot stronger than animals back on Earth. Depending on their level and control of the ability, it allowed them to tame higher and lower level beasts. It would also affect the amount of beasts they could control at one time as well. Their power was borrowed power in a way. They weren't the ones that did the actual fighting, or this is what others would think. It was the general thought between the public or those that had never seen a Bree before. The Brees were actually incredibly talented when it came to fighting. For when taming a stronger beast, one would have to show it was stronger than what it was trying to tame. There would be cases where this wasn't needed, but for the higher levels it was a different story. With their incredible fighting skills and strong beasts, they were able to work together, creating a powerful force, and eventually climbed up the leader to be a part of the Big 4. Just relying on others' powers wasn't enough to make it at the leader's table. The group of travelers had already gone, Lily the archer had decided to stay behind to keep a close eye on the students, just in case any other beasts appeared. Layla wanted to say something, as she was sure Quinn didn't want Fex to be hurt and was trying to come up with a way to save him, but she couldn't think of a good explanation and they had already gone. "Don't worry, my friends are strong," Lily said with a smile, trying to comfort the students. She thought they must have had such a terrible experience, fighting down here in the dark. "That's what I'm worried about," Layla thought, "because my friends are strong as well." With all three of the boys standing around the bloodsucker, it was confused with who to target. Suddenly, it started to sniff into the air like some type of hound. "What's it doing?" Peter asked. Quinn thought the same thing, but that's when he realized what a bloodsucker really was. It was a starved vampire. It was unable to consume the blood of Peter and Quinn, so the only one there it would be interested in was Vorden. "Vorden, run!" Quinn shouted as he tried to dash forward to his side. But the larger spirit spear had worn off, and at most Vorden was able to produce 2 more spears, slowing down the beast by 20%. Even with this reduction, it was still a lot faster than Quinn, and he would never be able to reach Vorden's side in time. Seeing the bloodsucker heading towards him gave him bad memories once again, and he had frozen in place. Vorden hadn't felt fear like this in a long time. "Sil, we need you," Vorden shouted, trying to think quickly on his feet. Quinn took out the flask. He was hoping if he popped open the lid, the smell of blood would allow it to change its target. However, even before Quinn was able to do that, a strange lion-like beast had jumped in between Vorden and the bloodsucker. As it pounced towards the bloodsucker, its flames on its tails grew brighter. The two of them clashed in the center, claw against paw, and surprisingly, even to the beast's surprise, it was outpowered and pushed back. It was chucked to the ground and rolled on the floor, before quickly picking itself up and growling loudly at the creature. "Looks like you're going to need my help with this one, Cookie." The young man Andre held out his spear and stood by his lion's side. "This is not the same beast we encountered before," Andy said. The others had now come and joined their leader in battle. "This beast is stronger than Cookie. Not only that, but it seems to be stronger than the king-tier beast we had met up with earlier." When Andy and his group of companions came down before to fight against the king-tier beast, they weren't strong enough to force it into a rage mode. This is why they believed the bloodsucker was more powerful than the king-tier beast. When both of them were fighting at their full power, they were actually even. The 2 bald twins had appeared, one by Vorden's side and the other by Peter's side. "You guys did well to survive against such a thing," one of them said. "But you can now leave it to us," the other said, ending the first one's sentence. "We will take you back to your friends. Follow us quickly as we must help our leader to fight." The twins were insistent, and before they could even reply, they were already trying to pull both Vorden and Peter out of the fighting area. While being pulled along, Vorden was moving his head around the area. "Where's Quinn? Wasn't he just on the other side? If he's hiding, he has to have a reason," Vorden thought. However, when one of the twins tried to pull Peter, they were suddenly stopped. The twin yanked again, and it felt like he was trying to move a large boulder. "What are you doing? Why won't you move? If you stay here, you will be killed." Peter then looked back in a certain direction. He waited a while before replying. "Okay, but don't touch me, or I might bite your hand off." The twin was wondering, just who was this student? They had just come to save their lives, and they were threatening them. Although he wanted to snap back, he knew they were only students and they must have gone through a lot, which was why Peter had responded the way he did. The 2 boys were taken out of the area, and now Andre and Andy felt like they could fight with no worry. The bloodsucker went towards the 2 in front of its eyes. It hadn't been injured much, but it was still starving from blood, as spit continued to drip from its mouth. The first to move out of the 2 was Andy. He jumped forward and with his large shield and braced himself for an attack. Slowly, parts of the shield seemed to cover itself in reinforced earth. The core and metal part of the shield could still be seen, but now the shield was twice the size and the outside covered in parts of earth. The attack hit against the shield, breaking most of the earth away, but the shield was still perfectly intact. Still, the power of the strike caused Andy to slightly tumble himself, nearly falling to the ground, but a hand was placed on his back, stabilizing him. "Imhe," Andre said. Instead of charging forward, the bloodsucker could sense a slight vibration in the air and move backwards. A few moments after, and 2 slices of wind went past. How did he know it was coming? One of the twins said. They had returned from escorting the kids to Lily and had used their wind abilities, throwing out a kick and slice of wind. It looks like this beast has some level of intelligence, Andre said as he jumped up onto Andy's shoulder, before running on top of his shield and jumping right on the edge towards the beast. From the side, Cookie, the lion beast, pounced once again. The flames this time on its tail were even more brighter than before, and when they clashed, neither one of them was falling back. The bloodsucker seemed to still be slightly stronger, but Andre just wanted it held there for a moment. As he thrusted his spear forward, he was able to hit the creature right between the ribs. Fex began to scream in pain as the pointy object was jammed into him. Usually, his tough muscles would be able to form some type of protection, but seeing how easy it was able to penetrate him meant the weapon was one of a high level. Andre let go of the spear and was ready to hit it in further, digging it into the creature, trying to cause a serious wound, but the second he let go, a large red line of airwa had come from the side. He didn't know what it was, but he could sense its power and leant back, narrowly avoiding the strike. "Get away from my friend." A strange robotic and deep voice sounded. As the group turned to look at who had spoken those words, all they could see was a human figure dressed in a bulk suit, wearing a demon mask that was covering its bottom jaw, while its eyes were white and shaped like a demon.